During a violent thunderstorm, a holy knight appears before the vampire, who had been hiding for half a year. The knight confronts him, accusing him of being a monster responsible for countless deaths and acknowledging that manipulating the holy knights had been a clever trick. He declares that the vampire's role ends here and that divine forgiveness is no longer possible. Drawing his sword, the knight makes it clear that the vampire will die by the hand of Slayer. The vampire collapses to the ground, bleeding, as the knight condemns his twisted form as proof of his sins, his deception of the church, and his rejection of its judgment. Laughing hysterically, the knight reveals that the long delay in capturing him was intentional. He joined the hunt late and allowed the vampire to escape so that his eventual execution would appear refined and serve as a warning to others. Staring at the blade meant to end his life, the vampire realizes that the world operates on a simple rule. Survival belongs to the strongest, regardless of intention or morality. Power alone determines fate. The sword cuts through his body, ending the life of a vampire who had fled because he understood this truth too late. As pain spreads through him, he questions whether choosing to run had been a mistake. Even as his life fades, the knight continues to belittle his existence, calling it an insult to the church. With regret filling his heart, the vampire reaches toward the sky, wishing for another chance, before his body falls lifeless under the knight's laughter. He suddenly awakens inside a tent, gasping for air. Panic grips him as he touches his neck and limbs, finding them unharmed. His hands are bandaged, and nothing resembles the injuries from his execution. Looking around, he realizes this is not a dream. He is inside the same tent he lived in before the Holy Knights began hunting him. Carved markings in the wood reveal the date, confirming that he has returned to 6 months before the pursuit began. Standing still, he understands that this is a genuine second chance, and that wasting it would be a mistake. The scene shifts to a remote forest near the village of Broadwin, a place avoided by humans. This was where Eugene lived in hiding, a weak vampire surviving day by day. He never desired human blood, but a single moment of instinct in the past had led to mercenaries arriving the next day and holy knights 5 days later. They searched relentlessly, chasing him for years until he was finally found. For 12 years, he lived in fear, sustaining himself on animal blood in the forest. Though he does not know why he returned to the past, Eugene decides not to repeat the same path. He runs through the forest, determined that even if he dies, it will not be in hiding. If they come for him again, he will be ready. Under the pale moonlight, he changes his approach and begins using vampire magic. Vampires grow stronger by consuming blood, and the strength gained depends on the power of its owner. As Eugene moves forward, he senses danger approaching. The water nearby erupts as the forest lord emerges, a massive creature with powerful jaws. He narrowly avoids the initial attack, realizing that his weakened body struggles even to evade properly. He decides that inflicting a single wound will be enough to absorb the creature's blood and gain power. Abandoning his old habit of concealment, Eugene launches an attack. His previous method had failed, and hesitation would only lead to death. He swings his sword with all his strength, but it shatters against the monster's hardened skin. The forest lord retaliates with a crushing tail strike, sending Eugene flying into the water, blood trailing from his body. As the monster advances again, Eugene recognizes his miscalculation. Wanderers are creatures that roam freely outside demonic zones, and some possess magic stones, even in areas considered safe. These stones are more valuable than gemstones and could change the outcome of a battle. However, the gap in strength between him and the forest lord is overwhelming. Struck once more, Eugene realizes that he underestimated the opportunity given to him. At this moment, it is clear that the forest lord could end his life before he can land even a single wound. As the monster closes its jaws around him, Eugene briefly considers whether he had been mistaken to believe he would be given another chance if he failed again. He immediately rejects the thought, knowing he is not arrogant enough to assume such mercy. As he is swallowed, memories surface of his previous life, one spent crawling, holding his breath, and struggling only to survive. This time, he chooses a different path. His eyes glow crimson as he resolves to fight to live. Magic symbols form across his body, and his muscles begin to swell as his body transforms. He understands clearly that if he loses now, there will be no next chance. From within the monster's body, Eugene tears through its insides, holding on to the belief that defeat leaves no future and that victory must be seized by his own hands. He attacks the monster's magic stone, and its body explodes, scattering blood in all directions. Eugene emerges from the remains, confirming a truth he now accepts fully. Survival has always belonged to those who stand upon the blood of others. Among the scattered remains, he recalls the promise he made to himself when given his second chance. He would not run again. He would fight. Standing beneath the moonlight in his transformed state, he steels his resolve to claim power and victory. When the silence returns, Eugene observes that he absorbed not only the forest lord's blood, but its magic stone as well. The energy gained far exceeds his expectations. Examining the remains, he notices that the mana crystal differs in size and color from ordinary ones. From this, he realizes the ability it grants allows his skin to harden into black scales. He reasons that if these scales can completely block sunlight, it may allow him to move freely during the day. His memories align with this realization. He had learned of the forest lord through mercenaries. The swamps had expanded over time due to seasonal flooding, drawing the monster into the area where it began attacking humans. During that chaos, Eugene had once managed to drink a small amount of the injured monster's blood and escape after killing several mercenaries. Remembering how powerful that blood was, he had planned to return and absorb it fully. Even with his newfound strength, Eugene knows it is still not enough to face the holy knight, young Dirt. Until he is certain of victory, he must avoid unnecessary battles. He also understands that hiding is no longer an option, as the knight possesses exceptional tracking abilities against monsters and the undead. Instead of fleeing, Eugene must focus on gathering strength for an inevitable confrontation. As dawn approaches, he decides to return before sunrise, choosing to delay testing the crystal's full potential. At that moment, the stillness is disturbed by a presence within the water. The movement around him feels unnatural, accompanied by hostility directed at him for staining the land with blood. A water fairy reveals herself as Miran, the guardian of the lake, declaring the area her territory and condemning Eugene for polluting it. Eugene shows no reaction to her display and instead calmly seeks to understand who she is. This causes confusion, as she realizes he had not sensed her earlier presence. She confirms that he can indeed see and hear her, then introduces herself properly as Miran, a water spirit who once ruled the area before being subdued by the forest lord 15 years earlier. She attempts to justify her actions during that time, explaining that she maintained the water to sustain the monster, but ultimately expresses gratitude for her liberation and the cleansing of the land. Miran observes Eugene closely, believing that the frail appearance he previously had was merely a disguise to lower the monster's guard. At the same time, Eugene notices that one of the tattoos on his body has disappeared. When questioned about them, he explains that he does not know their purpose. He was born a vampire, and the earliest memory he has is of 10 tattoos already etched into his body. With no recollection of his origins, he had lived quietly without questioning them. Eugene considers the possibility that the tattoos may be seals or marks that unlock over time. Deciding not to linger, he prepares to leave and instructs Miran to safeguard the forest. His sudden departure surprises her, and she follows, expressing her boredom and her desire for companionship, citing the rarity of those who can perceive spirits. She attempts to persuade him to stay and purify the swamp, offering assistance in the form of water purification. Eugene remains uninterested and orders her to keep her distance. Despite this, Miran continues following him, repeatedly offering help in increasingly unsettling ways as he leaves the area. Several days later, night falls over the village of Broadwin. Panic spreads when a villager rushes to alert the chief, reporting the appearance of a red-eyed monster. The villagers gather in fear, expecting an attack, only to find a massive pile of hunted game left at the edge of the village. The sight leaves them stunned, uncertain whether they are even allowed to take so much meat. Confusion spreads as they realize this visit came earlier than usual. The red-eyed monster who lived at the foot of the mountain had brought hunted animals once every 2 weeks for the past decade, never directly threatening the village. Although the village chief cannot understand the creature's intentions, he hesitantly allows Eugene to enter the village briefly. When Eugene first appeared 10 years earlier, fear had gripped everyone. Over time, his consistent offerings of game, treated as a form of tax, created an unspoken agreement. The villagers avoided him, and he remained distant. Now, his sudden appearance unsettles them. Their unease deepens when Eugene removes his mask, revealing his face. Calm and composed, he appears unchanged by the years of isolation. He explains that he has recovered from his illness and came to share the news. He expresses gratitude for the help the village provided in the past and offers his assistance should they ever need it. After delivering the game, he leaves quietly, his departure leaving the villagers shaken and uncertain. As they watch him go, speculation spreads. Some wonder whether the creature from the forest was never truly a monster, but perhaps a half-elf or an exiled noble. His appearance does not match the image they had imagined for so many years. On the way back through the forest, Miran questions Eugene's decision to give the villagers all of the hunted game and asks what he intends to do next. Eugene explains that while vampires are feared for bloodshed, showing one's face is a sign of goodwill among humans. Miran finds this reasoning pointless, especially since Eugene had planned to leave the area soon. Eugene pauses, realizing that he had been wrong to believe nothing tied him to this place. He understands that he cannot remain detached from what is about to happen. He reveals that mercenaries will soon attack the village. Their objective is to abduct a specific boy and deliver him to the regional lord, Sir Terwin. To erase evidence and witnesses, the mercenaries will slaughter the entire village. Eugene knows this massacre will inevitably draw the attention of the Holy Knights to the region, leading to the future he is trying to avoid. Preventing this outcome becomes necessary. Miran doubts that mercenaries would go so far as to kill everyone, but Eugene remains certain. He states that the truth will soon become clear. His first step, he decides, is to gain the villagers' trust so that he appears harmless, even though Miran struggles to understand how this connects to stopping the attack. As they continue walking, Eugene suddenly stops. Armed men emerge ahead. The mercenaries mistake him for a villager due to his simple clothing, disrupting their plan to ambush the village unnoticed. One notes that his appearance is unusual, but they quickly decide to eliminate him since he is alone and unarmed. An attack comes from behind. Eugene reacts instantly. In a brief moment, blood is spilled, and the first mercenary falls. Miran is left stunned by the speed and precision of the strike. Eugene continues without hesitation, moving decisively as the remaining mercenaries realize they are not facing an ordinary opponent. Panic spreads as his inhuman strength becomes evident. They attempt to overwhelm him with numbers, but their attacks fail. Eugene moves through them efficiently, striking each down before they can coordinate. As the sun sinks lower, the advantage shifts further in his favor. When a heavily built mercenary attacks with a spiked mace, Eugene stops the blow, breaks the weapon, and ends the fight. Bodies lie scattered across the ground. Eugene assesses the scene, recognizing this as the appropriate moment to erase traces of blood. Any remaining resolve among the mercenaries collapses, replaced by fear. Not long after, villagers arrive with torches, led by the village chief. They freeze at the sight of the torn bodies before them. The chief stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend how such a scene could have unfolded so close to the village. One villager turns away and vomits at the sight, while the village chief looks at Eugene with suspicion, questioning whether he was responsible for such brutality. Eugene calmly denies any involvement, stating that he discovered the scene while returning from checking his traps in the forest. He gestures toward the bodies and explains that the mercenaries were ambushed while heading toward Broadwind. He then points out what he claims are the true culprits. The villagers react with shock as they notice the corpses of black wolves lying among the dead. Eugene continues his explanation, saying the wolves had gathered in large numbers and were feeding on the bodies when he arrived. He claims to have driven them off after killing several, adding that the rest may still be nearby. The chief is visibly unsettled, impressed by Eugene's supposed ability to deal with such dangerous beasts alone. One villager inspects the bodies and confirms the presence of claw marks, reporting this to the chief. Another agrees, stating that all the wounds appear consistent with wolf attacks. With this confirmation, suspicion fades. The chief feels embarrassed for doubting Eugene and offers an apology, which Eugene accepts without hesitation. Concerned about leaving the bodies exposed, Eugene asks what should be done with them. The chief decides they will be buried within the village. Nearby, Miran quietly mocks Eugene for lying so thoroughly. In truth, the wolves were not responsible for the mercenaries' deaths. They appeared only after Eugene had finished killing them. He eliminated the wolves afterward and deliberately used a wolf's jaw to create bite marks on the mercenaries' bodies, carefully shaping the scene to conceal his actions. Miran privately wonders why Eugene places so much importance on how the villagers perceive him. Simply disappearing would have been enough, yet he chose to remain and preserve his image. Watching him closely, she senses that he is working towards something more. Eugene approaches the village chief again with a serious demeanor. He explains that while checking the bodies for belongings to return to their families, he found a sealed letter and suggests the chief read it. The chief recognizes the seal immediately as belonging to Lord Terwin, the ruler of the region. As he reads the contents, his expression changes, disbelief giving way to shock. The chief urgently turns to the villagers, searching for a boy named Vilai. It is confirmed that the boy is inside the village. At that moment, Vilai is simply eating inside one of the houses, unaware of what is unfolding. The letter reveals that he may be the illegitimate son of Lord Terwin. The chief realizes that the mercenaries were not there to loot the village, but to capture the boy. The understanding that a noble's bloodline had been living quietly among them leaves him shaken. The scene shifts back to the battlefield earlier that night. The mercenary captain watches in disbelief as Eugene overwhelms his men with overwhelming speed and strength. Eugene moves among them without pause, killing before they can react. Attempts to flee only result in quicker deaths, forcing the remaining mercenaries to abandon hesitation and attack together. The captain, wounded and terrified, finds himself unable to escape. As he advances from behind, Eugene strikes him with a powerful kick that shatters his armor and sends him crashing into a tree. Blood fills the captain's mouth as he collapses. Crawling among the corpses of his men, he pleads for his life, questioning whether Eugene had been waiting for them all along and trying to justify their actions as mere work. Eugene cuts off his attempt at justification and demands the truth, making it clear that the village falls under his protection. The captain panics and insists that they were not sent to hunt vampires and had no idea the village belonged to someone like Eugene. He reveals that their mission was to locate the illegitimate son of the Terwin family, who had been hiding there. Eugene presses him further, pointing out that such a large force would not be assembled for a simple search. The captain hesitates before admitting that while massacre was not officially ordered, eliminating the village was considered a necessary measure to erase witnesses. He further confesses that the mission was not commissioned by the Terwin Patriarch, but by Kamar Terwin and Veril Terwin. Eugene immediately recognizes the significance of the name Veril Terwin. He knows him as the leader of the Vampire Hunter Squad and the knight who once pursued him alongside the Holy Knight, Young Dirt. Analyzing the situation, Eugene understands that a knight like Veril would not openly command massacre. The decision to destroy the village had been made by the mercenaries themselves to cover their tracks. With this realization, Eugene finally understands why the Holy Knights had found him in his previous life. It was not a mistake on Eugene's part that led the Holy Knights to him in the past. The disappearance of an entire village had triggered a large-scale investigation, and that search eventually uncovered his existence. The mercenary captain continues pleading, claiming he had only seen the job as an easy opportunity for money and insisting that he would never have acted if he had known Eugene was there. Eugene orders the captain to leave, warning him calmly about the wolves along the way. The captain is stunned, unable to believe he has been spared. As he begins to express gratitude for this unexpected mercy, Eugene ends his life in an instant, severing his head with a swift strike. Miran is shaken by how casually he carries out the execution. Eugene explains that the mercenary knew the truth about him as a vampire and could not be allowed to spread it. He adds that the wolves surrounding the area are hungry and that it is time to feed them. Eugene then returns to the village and resumes shaping his version of events. He explains to the chief that the dead mercenaries were guards sent to escort the boy Vili to the castle. This revelation shocks the villagers. They recall that Vili arrived 8 years earlier and lost his mother the previous year. Fear spreads at the thought that the very people meant to protect him were all killed. Eugene steps forward and offers to accompany the boy himself, stating that his long experience surviving in the forest makes him capable of protecting Vili on the journey to the city. The chief hesitates, aware that they are being asked to rely on someone they once feared. Eugene presents himself confidently, insisting that refusing help would go against his principles. From nearby, Miran quietly mocks his composure and ease with deception. Confusion spreads among the villagers when Eugene introduces himself formally as Jan Eugene of the noble Eugene family, apologizing for not doing so earlier. Miran reacts with disbelief at his audacity, but the villagers respond immediately. Their attitude shifts as they scold one another for their earlier treatment of him, now convinced that he is a noble rather than a monster. Miran warns him that his deception has gone too far, but Eugene remains unconcerned. He understands that no one in this remote village has ever met a true noble, nor do they possess the means to verify his claim. The villagers gather around him, constructing their own explanations for his long isolation in the forest, attributing it to harsh training or recovery from battle. Eugene allows these assumptions to stand, confirming only that he had cut ties with others due to special circumstances. This convinces them that his hunting skills are the result of nightly training. The village chief apologizes for their poverty and their inability to offer proper rewards. Eugene declines any compensation and asks only for a place to rest for the night. The chief welcomes him warmly, considering it an honor to host him. The following morning, Eugene looks out from the wooden house. He activates the ability gained from the forest lord, watching as his skin hardens into black scales. Realizing that this transformation can block sunlight to a significant degree, he decides to rely on it to travel during the day and avoid unnecessary complications. Miran appears again, mocking his claims of knighthood and pointing out his lack of formal knowledge. Eugene ignores her remarks, stating that he will leave soon and needs her cooperation rather than commentary. Miran is surprised by how quickly he has shifted from isolation to forming connections and accepting responsibility. The villagers inform him that preparations are complete. Eugene gestures toward them, explaining to Miran that authority and status inspire trust more effectively than words. By establishing status first, fewer lies are needed to secure belief. As he places his mask over his face, Eugene acknowledges that this approach works only because the village is remote and inexperienced. He knows true nobles would not be deceived so easily. Rather than abandon the deception, Eugene decides to make it real. By combining genuine ability with the trust he has earned, he intends to turn falsehood into fact. The village chief reads the explanation Eugene prepared for the boy, and Eugene understands that reinforcing lies with tangible results is the only way to sustain them. Vili greets him respectfully, placing his expectations in Eugene's guidance for the journey ahead. Recognizing that solidifying this role requires genuine standing, Eugene once again presents himself as Jan Eugene of the Eugene family. With that, the two depart together, beginning their journey. Eugene decides to use the boy as a bridge to become a real noble through legitimate means. They soon reach the outskirts of Bram's village, confirmed by a wooden sign, and Eugene notes that the information he had was accurate. He asks whether the boy knows how to read, and Vili explains that his late mother taught him letters. Despite her humble background, she had learned to read and write from someone she loved. Only later did Vili realize that person had been Sir Terwin. Miran immediately recognizes the situation as an opportunity and encourages Eugene to take advantage of it. When Eugene asks the boy to teach him how to read, Vili is stunned and confused by the idea of a knight who cannot read or write. Sensing the danger of suspicion, Eugene quickly reshapes the situation. He claims that his noble title is merely a facade and that his family had fallen long ago, forcing him to survive by the sword alone rather than through education. Vilai accepts the explanation with sincerity. Eugene reinforces his own understanding that once trust is established, it becomes a shield that protects even obvious lies. Miran quietly mocks his performance, warning that excessive deception could eventually invite doubt. However, Vilai's expression makes it clear that he believes Eugene completely. The boy apologizes for his earlier unease, admitting that rumors from the village had shaped his judgment. He resolves to trust what he sees rather than hears, and reasons that Eugene's lack of education may simply be the result of a warrior's upbringing. Wanting to avoid embarrassing him, Vilai offers to teach Eugene in secret whenever possible. As the boy grows curious about Eugene's past, an arrow suddenly flies past his face. He screams and falls to the ground while Eugene calmly registers the attack. Bandits emerge from the trees, mocking the poor aim of the shooter. Vilai trembles in fear, realizing they're being robbed. The bandits underestimate their targets based on appearance, believing the encounter will end quickly. They demand the luggage and valuables, threatening death if their orders are not followed. Eugene draws his sword instantly. In a moment, he closes the distance and kills the leader before the others can react. Shock spreads among the bandits as they realize the mistake they made. Eugene moves smoothly, cutting them down one after another without hesitation. Panic overtakes them, but escape proves impossible. As the bodies fall, Eugene reflects coldly on why humans prey on those they perceive as weaker. He questions whether weakness itself becomes justification for cruelty. When the last bandit collapses, Eugene turns his attention back to the boy. He makes it clear that Vilai is free to think as he wishes and reassures him that no harm will ever come to him. They eventually arrive at a busy city market filled with noise and movement. Merchants argue with customers, voices rising over disputes about price and quality. Miran moves freely through the crowd, while Vilai warns Eugene to be cautious. He explains that merchants often exploit outsiders and that even the village chief was frequently deceived. Watching an argument unfold between two traders, Eugene realizes that money is his immediate concern. He asks Vilai to wait and enters a shop, offering black wolf skins for sale. The merchant is surprised by the quantity and quality of the goods. Judging Eugene by his appearance, the merchant assumes he is an uneducated wanderer and attempts to deceive him with a low offer, claiming the skins are damaged. Eugene silently fixes him with an unsettling gaze. The merchant grows nervous and raises the price incrementally, each increase driven by fear rather than negotiation. After several adjustments, the deal finally settles at 30 silver pieces, the maximum the merchant can afford. Eugene leaves the shop wearing newly purchased clothes. He examines a sign outside and realizes that letters still resemble meaningless shapes to him despite learning the basics. Miran comments that the clothes are decent and worth the price. Eugene remarks that the merchant was generous for a first transaction, prompting Miran to ridicule his assessment and point out how easily the man was pressured. Miran fixates on the silver coins with clear interest, lamenting that Eugene did not push further for luxury items. Eugene explains that his only concern is covering his body well enough to block sunlight. Miran criticizes his restrained way of living and urges him to aspire to more than survival. She describes grand images of noble vampires living in luxury, surrounded by wealth and indulgence, insisting that ambition is essential to rise in the world. Eugene is surprised by the depth of her knowledge despite her isolation. Miran reminds him that she originates from the spirit world and learned much from elders who traveled through human lands and returned with experience and insight. Miran advises him on the importance of learning the imperial language and ancient runes. Since he is expected to live for at least 2 centuries unless killed, she insists that learning everything possible is necessary. Eugene suddenly asks whether she can read. She answers honestly that she cannot. Later that night, Eugene sits quietly by the campfire. Vilai approaches him with hesitation, interrupting what seemed like a one-sided conversation. The boy asks who Eugene was speaking to, as he had seen no one nearby. Eugene quickly claims he was talking to himself, and shifts the topic, asking about Vilai's condition after vomiting earlier. Vilai apologizes for the unpleasant scene and explains that watching the rabbit being skinned reminded him of the massacre from the morning, which causes nausea. Moran remarks that it may have been too much for him, while Eugene reassures the boy that most ordinary people are not accustomed to such sights. Vilai decides to make use of the time, noting that he still has energy and the night is long. He eagerly offers to teach Eugene writing, since they have extra paper, clearly pleased to be useful. The lesson begins, and Vilai is surprised by how quickly Eugene understands. He finds it hard to believe that learning letters can progress this fast, and sincerely praises Eugene, saying he learned in one night what normally takes months. Eugene responds modestly, brushing off the praise. As the lesson continues, Eugene wonders whether learning only the basics will be enough for Vilai, who is about to become a noble son. Vilai admits it still feels unreal. His mother never shared much about it, and he never gave it serious thought before. With quiet tension, he adds that he does not even expect Sir Terwin to welcome him warmly. Their conversation is interrupted when a group of armed men on horseback emerges from the trees. A man with gentle features and a light beard steps forward, explaining that they are having trouble finding a place to camp and asking to share the area. Eugene observes them carefully, noting their quality weapons, armor, and orderly formation. He immediately understands they are mercenaries, not common bandits. The leader notices the child and asks about their destination. Eugene recognizes the professional nature of the question and decides that lying carelessly would only invite suspicion. He answers truthfully that they are heading to Lord Terwin's castle. The leader, Bardic, says they're going the same way and proposes sharing food and supplies in exchange for the campsite. A young blonde soldier objects rudely. Bardic apologizes on his behalf, explaining that the youth is new and lacks discipline. He introduces himself, and Eugene introduces himself as a knight. This provokes mockery from the young soldier, who questions Eugene's appearance, lack of armor, and absence of a horse. He steps closer, accuses Eugene of lying about his status, and presses a finger into his chest, claiming he has never heard of any noble family bearing Eugene's name. Eugene meets him with a cold stare. He realizes he cannot retreat from the claim he already made to Vilai. Calmly assessing the situation, he understands that the mercenaries did not approach randomly, and that continued doubt would only escalate matters. He grips his sword beneath his cloak, calculating that their numbers are manageable if violence becomes unavoidable. Sensing the sudden shift in tension, Bardic reacts immediately. He strikes the reckless soldier with a single, decisive blow, sending him flying. He then apologizes earnestly to Eugene and asks for forgiveness for the disrespect. Eugene accepts the apology without emotion and orders them to keep their distance. While Bardic expresses gratitude, Eugene knows that suspicion will only grow from here. He concludes that he must fully assume the role of a knight and prove it soon to prevent further scrutiny. Later, away from Eugene, Bardic sits beside the unconscious youth. When a young man wakes, confused and indignant, Bardic scolds him harshly. He explains that the blow saved his life and that his behavior nearly got everyone killed. The youth dismisses Eugene as harmless based on his appearance, but Bardic rebukes him for judging too shallowly. He points out that Eugene's cloak alone is made of high-quality lycanthrope leather, worth more than 10 silver coins, exceeding several months of the youth's wages. He adds that Eugene was clearly literate, which rules out him being a common wanderer. Finally, Bardic reveals that Eugene was already on the verge of drawing his sword. Had he done so, most of them would not have survived. Bardic explains what he noticed in that moment. Eugene's hand already gripping his weapon beneath the cloak, his foot subtly shifting backward, and his balance perfectly aligned. It was a stance used only by someone with precise control and extensive combat experience. Bardic confirms with visible unease that if he had hesitated even a single second, Rabin's head would already be on the ground. Rabin tries to maintain his bravado, insisting that the leader would have stopped the attack anyway. Bardic responds with complete seriousness, explaining that Rabin has no real understanding of the terror and authority carried by knights. He explains that knights are raised from birth in noble families, trained with wooden swords from childhood, and spend their entire lives mastering the art of killing. They enter unexplored dungeons without hesitation, pierce through monsters without blinking, and carve their reputation on battlefields by cutting down humans. Only those whose hands are deeply stained with blood earn recognition among nobles. After years of violence and survival, they are finally granted the title of knight. Bardic emphasizes that impersonating a knight is a grave crime. Whether Eugene is a real knight or a fake, both possibilities are dangerous. Anyone bold enough to claim such a title must be confident enough to gamble their life on their sword. The fact that Eugene openly revealed his identity at such a young age suggests he has already reached a frightening level of strength. When Rabin asks, sweating with fear, whether that means Eugene might be stronger than Bardic himself, the leader admits that it is very possible. He concludes by noting that Eugene mentioned traveling to Lord Tyne's castle, likely due to the recently discovered dungeon. Since their destinations align, they are bound to encounter him again. From the shadows, Eugene watches silently, a faint smile forming as he realizes the weight and influence the title of knight carries. It aligns perfectly with his plans, though he also understands that fully maintaining this role will require further preparation. Analyzing the situation calmly, Eugene notes that aside from the reckless rookie, the mercenary group is competent and disciplined. This leads him to question why the Tyan family previously employed the lowly bandits he killed instead of professionals like these, and why they did not use their own private soldiers. Something about the situation feels incomplete and suspicious. When the mercenaries notice Eugene approaching, tension rises. He presents himself calmly and explains that he heard they are also heading to Lord Tyne's castle. Since their destinations match, he suggests traveling together, using the moment to his advantage. The rookie soldier reacts awkwardly, momentarily flustered by Eugene's composed demeanor, while Bardic observes him with surprise. The group eventually reaches Martila, a lively village within the Twin territory. Eugene moves through the crowded streets with his face partially covered, relieved that the mercenaries fully accepted his identity as a knight. This gives him an opportunity to gather information during the journey. Miran appears beside him, curious about what will unfold next. She reports that she followed his instructions and listened in on the mercenaries' conversations. From what she learned, Lord Tyne's condition has worsened severely, to the point where he could die at any moment. She also reveals that a newly discovered dungeon lies within his territory, rumored to hold immense wealth, but the Tyne family lacks both the funds and manpower to exploit it. Eugene considers the implications of the dungeon, while Miran raises concerns about Vilai's future. If Lord Tyne dies soon, the boy could be left vulnerable once again. Eugene initially dismisses the issue, which angers Miran, who fears the child could be eliminated during a succession struggle. Observing Vilai quietly moving through the crowd, Eugene pieces together the likely reason behind Lord Tyne summoning his illegitimate son at this time. He suspects the man simply wishes to see his child once before death. Eugene reflects that both his fate and the boy's fate are now set on a path that cannot remain unchanged. Soon, Rose Castle comes into view, its massive structure dominating the horizon. Upon entering through the main gate, Eugene notes that the castle is far larger than he anticipated. Miran flits about in fascination, remarking on the luxury and urging him to climb higher in status. Eugene silences her and proceeds inside, while Vilai watches with confusion. A guard stops them and demands identification and purpose. Bardic steps forward, confidently introducing his group as mercenaries hired by the Balan Merchant Guild. As the guard questions the others, a blond young man with arrogant features intervenes. He identifies himself as Kamar, the eldest son and heir of the Tyan family, and coldly questions the delivery. After confirming the goods have arrived safely, Kamar orders the mercenaries to begin unloading without delay. He then notices Eugene standing apart and questions his identity and why he is not working. Eugene steps forward calmly, introduces himself as a knight, and indicates that the child beside him is under his care. Before the exchange can continue, a firm voice interrupts, reprimanding Kamar and questioning his actions. Eugene turns toward the voice, instantly recognizing it. Annoyance flashes across Kamar's face as a knight in a red cloak and polished armor approaches, asserting his authority as the castle's guard. Eugene stiffens as the voice triggers memories he cannot forget. His thoughts return to a painful past, recalling the man who discovered him while he was hiding, the one who hunted and tortured him relentlessly. The speaker is revealed to be Bertel Tyan, the second son of the family and their direct knight, standing tall in his red cloak. Bertel questions his elder brother with strict composure. Kamar responds with thinly veiled sarcasm, implying that Bertel's behavior makes it seem as though he considers himself the true heir. Bertel's expression shifts to visible annoyance as he denies any such intention. Eugene interrupts the escalating family dispute without hesitation, presenting a letter and informing them that it was sent by Chief Jeb of Broadwind Village. Bertel moves to take the letter immediately, surprise flickering across his face at the mention of Broadwind, but Eugene pulls his hand back. Instead, he hands the letter to Kamar while maintaining steady eye contact with Bertel. Kamar reads the letter, his expression changing as he processes its contents. It explains that the hired mercenaries were wiped out by a wolf attack and confirms that the child escorted by the knight is the family's illegitimate son. Vilide steps forward with unsteady movements and introduces himself. Kamar's expression shifts into a practiced smile as he welcomes the boy as his younger brother. Bertel, however, watches him with a cold and unsettling gaze. Kamar remarks that their father has missed him greatly. Bertel issues curt orders to the servants, instructing them to clean the boy and dress him properly. Vilide turns instinctively toward Eugene, fear evident in his eyes. Before they can move, Eugene intervenes, halting the situation. His action catches Bertel off guard, and he looks at Eugene in disbelief. Eugene firmly demands that the matter of his reward be discussed first and states that he will meet Lord Tyan personally. Bertel reacts immediately, his anger flaring as he rejects the request. He explains that their father's condition is unstable and that arranging a meeting is not possible. Instead, he offers immediate payment in gold in exchange for Eugene leaving the castle. Eugene responds with a steady, unyielding stare. He reflects briefly on the effort it took to deliver the boy safely and makes it clear through his posture that he will not leave so easily. Without raising his voice, he applies pressure, making it clear that he will not repeat himself. Kamar intervenes, questioning the feasibility of Eugene's demand, which provokes Bertel into snapping angrily at his brother. The argument between them exposes the growing rift within the family. Kamar insists that their father must meet his newly returned son, while Bertel counters that Lord Tyan cannot remain conscious for long and that allowing an unknown wanderer into his presence is reckless. Accusations follow, with Bertel claiming Kamar is manipulating their father's schedule, and Kamar accusing Bertel of distorting his words. Kamar eventually turns back to Eugene with a strained smile, expressing regret that his brother's behavior complicates matters. He places a hand on Eugene's shoulder and suggests that Eugene should return safely for now. He then turns to Vilide, stating that he will personally guide him and show him around the castle. The boy follows him quietly. Eugene watches the scene closely, realizing they never intended to grant him an audience with Lord Tyan. At that moment, the ground trembles as a heavy impact echoes nearby. A massive shadow appears in front of Bertel, accompanied by a large, red-haired man carrying several unconscious bodies over his shoulder. He greets the second son casually and drops the bodies onto the ground, explaining that these mercenaries were looting villagers instead of training as ordered, and that he dealt with them himself. The man, Galactic, suggests executing one of the captured mercenaries as an example. Bertel watches Eugene carefully as Bertel steps in and shuts down the suggestion. He explains that the mercenaries, though temporary hires, are still needed for the dungeon expedition and that discipline will be handled later. He proposes moving the discussion inside the castle, away from prying ears. Galactic agrees without hesitation. Outside, Bardic quietly asks Eugene if he knows the identity of the red-haired man, confirming that he is Knight Sir Galactic. Bardic speaks with admiration, noting that Galactic recently placed third in a tournament hosted by the Evergrove family. He describes Galactic's strength as overwhelming and mentions how he defeated hundreds of competitors with refined technique. Eugene wonders why someone of such caliber would be stationed in a remote region. Bardic explains that the newly discovered dungeon is likely the reason, adding that the first knight to conquer a new dungeon gains immense fame and recognition. Given the risks involved, Bardic's suspect Galactic intends to use this achievement to secure knighthood under a more powerful family. Eugene quietly reflects on the word knighthood and considers his next move. He then reminds Bardic that his current contract ends today. Bardic confirms this, and Eugene asks him to consider a new request. Bardic listens as Eugene smiles faintly beneath his mask. Later that night, Kamar sits inside the castle, watching Bertil oversee the punishment of the mercenaries. He resolves internally that he must be the one to open the dungeon. His thoughts dwell on Bertil, who has begun openly positioning himself as a successor as their father's condition worsens. The arrival of a powerful knight like Galactic confirms Kamar's fears. If Bertil succeeds in opening the dungeon, public support will shift decisively in his favor. Kamar feels cornered. He knows he cannot rely on unqualified hires to face such a challenge. His thoughts are interrupted when a servant announces that Sir Eugene wishes to meet him. The request surprises him, but after brief consideration, he orders Eugene to be admitted. Eugene enters with his usual composed presence. Kamar welcomes him formally and attempts to guide the conversation, reassuring him that Vilai is being watched closely and that his safety is guaranteed. He invites Eugene to sit and explains that the reward will be granted once their father awakens. Kamar also remarks that Eugene's decision to present the letter publicly allowed him to maintain some standing in front of Bertil. Eugene responds with a measured smile, acknowledging the sentiment before calmly shifting the conversation. He remarks that intervening as a third party in internal family matters is unusual and not something he takes lightly. Kamar moves directly to the point, asking Eugene to clarify his purpose and whether his request to meet Lord Tyan is simply concern for the Lord's condition. Eugene confirms this, but adds that he has also come with a proposal meant specifically for Kamar. With steady composure, Eugene presents his offer to participate in the dungeon subjugation. The suggestion initially amuses Kamar, who reacts with open mockery, questioning both the request itself and Eugene's status as a knight. He references rumors of Eugene eliminating a small group of bandits and implies that this proposal may simply be an attempt to inflate his reputation. He questions why he should even consider indulging such a request. Eugene does not react offensively. Instead, he maintains confidence and states that the proposal carries no downside for Kamar, given his current circumstances. He outlines the terms plainly. He will take 100 silver coins for himself and his mercenaries and accept only half of the dungeon byproducts, excluding magic stones entirely from his share. Kamar's demeanor shifts as he processes the numbers. The terms are far below standard rates, enough to raise immediate suspicion. Eugene responds evenly, pressing Kamar to decide whether the offer appeals to him or not. He makes it clear that urgency lies not with him, but with Kamar. As Kamar analyzes the proposal, he considers Eugene's appearance and conduct. He seems like a wandering knight without noble backing, uninterested in excessive wealth, likely motivated by honor rather than profit. That assumption makes the offer appear sincere. Kamar recognizes the opportunity presented to him, especially given the time pressure surrounding the dungeon. He also realizes that Eugene is not simply relying on strength, but understands leverage and timing. His perception of Eugene changes accordingly. Kamar accepts the proposal, concluding that refusing such favorable terms would make little sense. He agrees to work together, confident that the arrangement benefits him. Eugene clarifies his reasoning for excluding magic stones, noting the difficulty and expense of purification compared to the immediate value of other dungeon materials. He also recalls arranging through Bardic an introduction to a trusted merchant guild to handle sales efficiently. Bardic readily agrees. With the terms settled, Kamar is satisfied that Eugene's participation strengthens his position. The matter moves forward without further delay. The scene shifts to a meeting room where Galactic sits alongside Bertil. Bertil voices open disapproval toward adding unfamiliar members so late in the preparations. Galactic reinforces the severity of dungeon expeditions, making it clear that mistakes result in death and that he has no tolerance for incompetence slowing progress. Bertel adds that his expectations are low, given that the recommendation came from Kamar, whom he considers poorly connected among noble circles. He suggests that if matters deteriorate, Galactic should deal with a new knight personally. Kamar enters shortly afterward and introduces Eugene formally as a new addition to the subjugation squad. Eugene follows quietly, accompanied by Bardic's mercenaries. Bertel studies Eugene closely, recognizing him as the man previously seen with a rough-looking group. He raises an objection, stating that accepting someone whose background and abilities are unverified is irresponsible. Kamar responds by vouching for Eugene's strength. He reminds them of the bandit group that plagued the territory's border for an extended period, a problem none of them resolved. He states that Eugene eliminated that group alone while traveling here, using only a short sword. Without warning, a dagger is thrown toward Eugene. He deflects it smoothly, redirecting the blade into the wooden wall behind him, where it embeds deeply. The display draws immediate attention. Galactic reacts with visible interest, his earlier skepticism giving way to curiosity. Galactic acknowledges the demonstration while making a pointed remark about Eugene's appearance, suggesting a sheltered upbringing. He positions himself directly in front of Eugene, openly challenging him to demonstrate his abilities further. Word spreads rapidly, and people gather in the castle square as news circulates that Galactic is facing a challenger. Spectators discuss his reputation with awe, recalling his performance in the grand tournament and the stories of his overwhelming strength. Against this backdrop, Eugene stands composed, unaffected by the attention. Galactic draws his massive sword with confidence. Eugene follows suit, adopting a matching stance. At the signal, the duel begins. The first clash sends sparks flying as steel meets steel. Heavy blows follow in rapid succession, with Eugene deflecting the force of Galactic's strikes while fragments scatter from the repeated impacts. Galactic appears energized by the exchange, pressing forward aggressively. Eugene responds with controlled movements, maintaining pressure and pushing the pace. Observers note the unexpected balance of the fight. Bardic explains that Galactic is not retreating out of weakness, but rather gauging Eugene's technique and rhythm. Eugene continues to advance, believing he is setting the flow of battle, while Galactic allows the momentum to unfold, carefully reading his opponent. During the exchange, Galactic carefully studies his opponent's movements. He notices that Eugene's swordsmanship is rough and irregular, lacking any recognizable pattern or consistent habits. The randomness makes his attacks difficult to anticipate. From this, Galactic concludes that Eugene's style is not the result of formal instruction, but something shaped by survival, developed through instinct rather than training. It resembles the way someone raised in harsh conditions would fight, relying purely on experience and reflex. Eugene notices the way Galactic observes him, and Galactic reacts with a mocking smile, openly exposing what he believes to be the truth. He identifies Eugene's stance as unrefined and his technique as ruthless rather than disciplined, asserting that Eugene has no formal background as a knight and depends entirely on abnormal physical strength. From his perspective, a brief exchange was enough to confirm this. Rather than responding verbally, Eugene answers with action, closing the distance and launching an attack. Galactic blocks it with ease, clearly enjoying the confrontation. The tempo of the fight increases, and the arena fills with continuous exchanges of steel. Galactic unleashes a heavy strike, and Eugene meets it head-on. The collision produces a violent shockwave that sends dust rising and obscures the field of vision. The spectators erupt, and Burles watches with satisfaction, assuming the blow was decisive. However, from within the dust, a red gleam appears as Eugene lunges forward at astonishing speed. Galactic manages to block, but his expression shifts as he realizes Eugene is adapting in real time. With each exchange, Eugene grows more aggressive and efficient, gradually matching Galactic's ferocity. Their clash reaches a breaking point, and both swords shatter from the force. They discard the broken weapons simultaneously and engage directly. Their hands lock as they close in, neither yielding. Galedic laughs in disbelief, struck by the contradiction between Eugene's smaller frame and the overwhelming strength he possesses. Looking into Eugene's eye, he accepts a hard truth. Eugene's raw power far exceeds his own. At the same time, Galedic recognizes that his advantage lies in experience. Refocusing, Galedic shifts his stance and attacks again, attempting to press that advantage. Eugene evades with remarkable flexibility, repeatedly avoiding blows that should have crushed him. As the assault continues, Eugene identifies an opening. Galedic realizes too late that Eugene's movements are not the product of technique, but of rapid adaptation driven by survival instinct. Before he can adjust, Eugene lands a clean punch to his face. The impact sends Galedic flying across the arena. His body crashes into the far wall, tearing through stone and raising another cloud of debris. Eugene remains standing, breathing heavily, as the arena falls into stunned silence before erupting again. The outcome is declared, and whispers spread through the crowd, unable to comprehend how an unknown knight defeated Galedic through sheer strength. Eugene's mercenaries react with open pride, laughing as they acknowledge him as their leader. From the wreckage, Galedic stirs and slowly stands. Eyes follow him, uncertain of what he will do next. Instead of hostility, he approaches Eugene, takes his hand, and raises it high, presenting him to the audience. The response is overwhelming, with cheers echoing throughout the castle. Bertel watches in silence, his expression tense as he struggles to contain his reaction. Later, inside the castle, Eugene sits before an elaborate dining table. The servants explain that they are acting under direct instructions from Kamar, who insisted Eugene eat properly and rest before the dungeon expedition. They remain attentive, awaiting his preferences. Nearby, Miron quietly mocks the situation, finding amusement in the fact that Eugene cannot explain that food is unnecessary for him. Wondering how much he can endure, Eugene suddenly clutches his stomach and pretends to be unwell. The servants panic, unsure how to respond, and Eugene dismisses them, insisting he will handle his meals alone. The following day, attitudes toward Eugene have completely shifted. Kamar greets him warmly, clearly pleased. He remarks on Eugene refusing the comforts provided, finding it amusing. Before the conversation settles, Rabin barges in loudly, disrupting the moment. Eugene shows visible irritation as Galedic suddenly rushes toward him, attempting to embrace him enthusiastically. Eugene pushes him away without hesitation. Galedic appears cheerful despite the bruises still visible on his face, openly acknowledging the damage from the previous fight. He seems more amused than bothered and quickly suggests another sparring match. Soldiers and mercenaries gather immediately, eager to watch. Eugene realizes that Galedic no longer cares whether he is truly a knight, and the doubts of others have steadily faded. While this is exactly what he intended, he remains uncomfortable with the growing attention as Galedic continues to provoke him playfully. Eugene reacts as if Galedic is inviting another blow, and Galedic shows no hesitation, confident that only another clash would reveal the outcome. Before the tension escalates, Vilide appears behind them. His face bears clear signs of abuse, and Eugene notices him immediately. Vilide asks weakly whether Eugene has been well. The scene shifts to the past, inside a torture chamber. A man in torn clothing screams as he begs for mercy. Bertel Tyen stands over him with a cold expression, watching as the man bleeds on the floor. He scolds him sharply, stating that the entire situation could have been avoided if the task had been handled properly. Bertel places the blame squarely on him, declaring that if the boy had been killed in that cursed village from the beginning, the red-eyed knight would never have reached Rose Castle. His eyes glow faintly as he vents his suppressed anger, convinced that his plans would have proceeded without issue if not for this failure. The subordinate trembles as he tries to defend himself, insisting that the mercenary group he hired was meant to be reliable, only to be wiped out by black wolves. Bertel mocks him for trusting others without verifying the matter himself. He grips the man's face with brutal force, questioning whether his eyes serve any purpose at all. Deciding they're useless, he cruelly resolves to remove them. The subordinate screams fill the chamber as Bertel carries out his punishment. Once finished, He coldly considers what must be done next to correct the situation. Bertel understands that killing someone who has already entered the castle and gained public visibility is no longer possible. A darker solution forms in his mind. His gaze shifts to Villaid's body lying nearby, concluding that the dungeon would serve as a convenient place to dispose of him without leaving evidence. The scene returns to the present. Eugene quickly deduces that Bertel ordered Villaid to join the upcoming dungeon subjugation squad. Villaid sits alone in his room, overwhelmed and resigned, admitting that he believes he was sent there to die. He wonders if the dungeon is simply meant to be his grave. Eugene reminds him of the mercenary attack on the village and reveals that those mercenaries were sent by one of his own brothers. He makes it clear that Villaid was never meant to reach the castle alive. The truth deepens the boy's despair. Eugene then approaches him directly and explains that there is still a way to survive. He offers a clear and simple solution. Villaid has already come of age and no longer needs approval to choose his path. Eugene presents him with two options only. He can remain passive and wait for his inevitable end, or he can fight for his life until the very last moment. Eugene offers him the chance to become his squire. The day of the dungeon's opening arrives. The subjugation squad gathers before a massive gate sealed with heavy chains. Since it has never been opened, no one knows what kind of monsters await inside. Galedic takes command, outlining expectations based on the gate scale. Low-rank and mid-rank monsters are anticipated, while high-rank threats remain unpredictable and warrant immediate withdrawal. Orders are issued to secure the tunnels first. Among the porters, nervous whispers spread. Some are relieved to be assigned to rear duties, hoping to avoid danger. One considers pretending to be injured once weaker monsters are cleared, but another warns that first raids are always brutal and no one looks after the rear. Fleeing would only result in a meaningless death. Before the discussion continues, one porter is struck from behind. Bertel appears among them, his expression frightening. He demands the whereabouts of Villaid, making it clear that he deliberately placed him among the porters. The porter hesitates before pointing him out. Bertel turns and sees Villaid handing Eugene a small bag, asking him to return safely, which Eugene acknowledges. Bertel storms toward them, berating Villaid for lingering. He orders him to take his bag and report to his assigned position immediately. When the boy does not respond, Bertel reaches out to seize him. Eugene watches closely. As Bertel's hand moves, it is abruptly stopped. Eugene grips his wrist firmly, preventing him from going any further. Bertel looks at Eugene in shock. Eugene confronts him directly, condemning the idea of sending a boy with no combat experience into a dungeon filled with monsters. Bertel shakes free and reacts with anger, claiming that he only intends to make his brother stronger. He attempts to reassert his authority, insisting Eugene has no right to interfere. Eugene cuts him off coldly and declares that Villaid officially became his squire the previous day. He announces this openly, so there are witnesses. He explains that this bond is stronger than blood and warns that any harm done to the boy will be considered a direct challenge against him. He steps closer to Bertel, making it clear that any further action will have consequences. Bertel falters, retreating slightly, questioning who authorized such a decision. He argues that taking in a bastard from another family is no small matter and could ruin the boy's future. Nearby warriors comment among themselves that the dungeon will be far safer with figures like Eugene and Galedic at the front. Some recall their duel, acknowledging the vast difference in strength between them and ordinary fighters. Kamar intervenes with a forced smile, stating that he too can entrust his brother to Eugene. He justifies this by acknowledging that Villaid is already an adult and has the right to choose his own path. Bertel watches with undisguised malice. Eugene reflects quietly. Once a predator marks the weak, hiding offers no protection. Even if the prey remains still, it will eventually be found and destroyed. Remembering this, Eugene recalls the advice he gave Villaid earlier. If one cannot become strong alone, then one must form a pack. A scout reports that no wandering monsters are detected nearby, and none are escaping the tunnels. Galedic reacts with eager anticipation and signals for the dungeon to be opened. The massive gate slowly parts, revealing deep darkness beyond. The soldiers advance as the raid begins. Inside, chaos erupts immediately. Monsters descend from above, crashing into the formation. Panic spreads as blood spills and cries for help echo through the darkness. Galedic charges forward, cutting down a monster in a single strike, attempting to restore order as the battle begins in earnest. Galedic quickly orders the archers in the center to return to their positions and cover the ceiling with arrows, warning the soldiers not to allow the monsters to break their formation. Fear overwhelms one of the soldiers, who immediately regrets volunteering for what now feels like a suicide mission. Convinced that his worst fears have come true, he turns and runs toward the entrance, believing escape is his only chance to survive. His hope shatters when he finds the path blocked by a pack of monsters waiting ahead. Panic freezes him in place until someone intervenes. Eugene appears without emotion, making it clear that retreating through an uncleared route was never a realistic option. Galedic seizes the terrified soldier and forces him back into formation, emphasizing that staying with the group is the safest way to survive. He orders everyone to draw their weapons and brace themselves. Observing the chaos, Galedic realizes how unprepared the gathered mercenaries truly are. They were assembled in haste, lacking coordination and discipline, and he wonders how a dungeon could possibly be conquered with forces like these. The situation worsens when reports come in of monsters approaching from multiple directions. Attacks from the rear force Galedic to make an immediate decision, reorganizing the formation to cover both fronts. Before further orders can be issued, Eugene steps forward and takes responsibility for the rear. Despite the danger of moving alone, he disappears into the darkness at incredible speed. Galedic is left momentarily stunned by both the speed and decisiveness of the move. Moments later, the sounds of combat echo through the corridor. Soon after, something emerges from the shadows. Galedic recognizes it as Eugene's discarded mask. Understanding what that implies, Galedic orders Bardic to cover his back and advances immediately. As they move forward, they are shocked by the sheer distance Eugene has covered in such a short time, as well as the number of monster corpses left behind. They find Eugene standing calmly at an intersection, having cleared the entire area alone. He holds a glowing flower in his hand, examining it with detached curiosity. Galedic arrives out of breath, while Bardic internally notes Eugene's unfamiliarity with even basic dungeon resources. Despite this, Galedic cannot help but acknowledge Eugene's exceptional combat ability. The glowing flower withers in Eugene's hand as the moment passes. After the skirmish, the wounded are treated along the corridor as groans and cries echo through the dungeon. Eugene's mercenaries approach and present the magic stones they collected. Eugene orders them to pile the stones in front of him and briefly inspects the amount, noting the surprisingly low yield considering the number of monsters defeated. He tells his men to rest and observe that the stones emit a blue glow unlike the one he previously obtained. Miran appears and studies the stones with mild disappointment, explaining that the quality of magic stones directly reflects the strength and size of the monsters they come from. Eugene asks whether wanderers possess larger stones. Miran clarifies that becoming a wanderer does not guarantee stronger stones, reminding him that the swamp lord he previously absorbed was an exceptional case. That creature had been powerful enough to dominate an entire territory. Eugene realizes that absorbing that red magic stone had been an extraordinary stroke of luck. Miran remarks that continuing dungeon raids merely to impress nobles holds little value if the rewards remain this limited. As Miran wonders whether a high-rank monster might be present, Eugene suddenly halts, sensing something unusual. At the same time, Galedic orders the soldiers back into formation, announcing that the break is over. He harshly scolds them for their weakness and declares that he and Eugene will take the vanguard. Anyone who flees without orders will face consequences later. Eugene briefly reflects on the irony of the situation. This is his first time inside a dungeon as well, yet he has already been placed at the front. Still, given the condition of the mercenaries, he understands there is little choice. Advancing carefully, Galedic senses a shift in pressure. The approaching monsters feel fundamentally different from those encountered earlier. He signals to Eugene that the goblins were likely expendable pawns, and that the true controllers of the dungeon are now emerging. His assessment proves accurate when heavily armed orcs appear, confirming the presence of at least mid-rank monsters. He reasons that if these enemies fall, even stronger threats may be waiting deeper inside. As tension grips the soldiers, Eugene recalls the moment after absorbing the Swamp Lord's red magic stone and the ability he gained from it. His eyes briefly glow as he wonders whether consuming another similar stone would grant further power. Refocusing, he analyzes the surroundings and identifies the approach of more than 50 monsters, with several heavier presences behind them. Galedic responds with visible excitement. Galedic weakly raised his hand and passed a spare weapon to Eugene, signaling for him to throw it toward the monster. Eugene understood the intent immediately and did not hesitate. Trusting his friend's judgment, he took the weapon, adjusted his stance, and hurled it with precise force toward the advancing creature, accepting the decision without question, and killing one of the monsters instantly. He orders a full assault, taking advantage of the disruption Eugene has already caused. Eugene moves through the orcs with overwhelming speed, cutting them down one after another. Galedic commands the soldiers to advance behind him and provide support. The soldiers follow, emboldened by Eugene's presence. One tries to call out for instruction, but Eugene is already engaged with a massive orc that suddenly blocks his path. He evades the creature's attack, strikes its eye with precision, and exploits its momentary loss of control. With swift movements, he disables its limbs and ends the fight with a decisive strike. Blood stains his armor as the creature collapses. The soldiers watch in silence, committing the scene to memory. They see Eugene standing amid the fallen, crushing his enemies with overwhelming force. To them, his movements appear controlled and refined, carrying an impression of unwavering resolve. They admire the figure before them, unaware of the raw survival instinct driving each action beneath the mask. When the fighting finally ends, the soldiers sink down among the fallen orcs, exhausted and silent, fully aware that what they witnessed was unlike anything they had experienced before. Galedic notices that most of the troops have lost their will to advance. The cause is not only physical exhaustion, but also the psychological shock of witnessing Eugene's overwhelming brutality in combat. Judging their condition, Galedic concludes that pushing forward any further is unrealistic. He suggests withdrawing now, since the required objective has already been achieved and the quota met. Eugene turns toward him and calmly confirms that he still has more than enough strength. Leaving at this point would mean wasting an opportunity that may not come again. Galedic reacts by trying to rally the soldiers, declaring that if Eugene continues, they will follow as well. However, Eugene immediately gives a different instruction. He orders Galedic to lead the subjugation squad out of the dungeon and ensure their safe withdrawal. He explains that he will continue onward with only his mercenaries. The soldiers stare at him in disbelief. Galedic quickly realizes that Eugene has sensed their physical and mental limits and is deliberately sending them away to preserve their lives. Watching Eugene disappear into the darkness, Galedic feels a quiet respect for the compassion hidden beneath that cold and violent exterior. In his eyes, Eugene has begun to redefine what it means to be a knight. Eugene and his mercenaries advance deeper into the dungeon, where thick spiderwebs fill the corridors. Fear grips the young soldier Raven as he walks with a trembling torch. He silently curses his luck, wondering why he had to come this far. He reassures himself that Eugene is strong enough to face monsters alone and that staying close behind him is the safest option. Suddenly, Raven feels a disturbing crunch beneath his foot. Looking down, he realizes he has stepped on a small spider. The realization hits immediately. They have entered spider territory. In the darkness, countless red eyes appear as spiders emerge from every direction, sealing off their escape routes. A giant cave spider reveals itself, a monster known for hunting in colonies and dissolving its prey with corrosive poison. Panic spreads as the spiders surge forward in overwhelming numbers. Bardic reacts by urging caution, but Eugene dismisses the idea of retreat outright. He charges forward, tearing through the swarm with terrifying speed. Spiders fall apart in an instant as his blade cuts through them effortlessly. Bardic orders Raven to stay close, but Raven struggles just to defend himself. Eugene notices the danger immediately. As spiders close in, Raven freezes in fear, unable to move. A massive spider drops from above, its jaws opening wide. At the final moment, Eugene intercepts it, cutting the creature cleanly in half before it can reach him. Raven stares in disbelief as Eugene stands before him, radiating overwhelming presence. With a single decisive motion, Eugene finishes the fallen spider. Raven watches silently, shaken, wondering whether the true monster is really the creatures around them. Once he regains his footing, Raven expresses his admiration and suggests withdrawing, believing they have already accomplished enough. Bardic, however, suddenly halts. He realizes a crucial oversight. Even among wandering monsters, there are strict hierarchies. High-rank creatures are rare and often excluded from subjugation planning. At that moment, a massive leg moves across the web-covered ceiling. Bardic understands instantly. The scale alone confirms it. A Lord-rank giant cave spider emerges, its enormous body and glowing eyes filling the corridor with dread. Bardic orders an immediate retreat, fully aware that they cannot face such a creature. He considers calling for outside assistance, but Eugene rejects the idea without hesitation. Eugene orders Bardic and Raven to withdraw immediately. As they retreat, a crushing pressure fills the air. Eugene's gaze locks onto the monster, his presence alone overwhelming those nearby. Bardic struggles to move, his instincts screaming at him to flee. Moran observes quietly, noting that the soldier's instincts collapsed under the sheer difference in power and status. Eugene assesses the monster and confirms its strength surpasses that of the swamp lord he once faced. The realization satisfies him. A stronger monster means a greater reward. Eugene advances without hesitation. To him, the value of the prize is always proportional to the difficulty of obtaining it. The scene shifts. A small spider descends gently on a thread toward a teacup in a sunlit garden. Eugene flicks it away casually. He now sits openly in daylight, his appearance completely human. The second ability he gained after devouring the Swamp Lord's magic stone is camouflage. Combined with his skin-hardening ability, it allows him to perfectly mimic natural human flesh. For the first time, he no longer needs to hide behind a mask. Now seated at a luxurious dining table, surrounded by nobles, attention gathers around him. Curiosity and admiration fill the air as rumors of his exploits circulate. Stories of a massive spider defeated alone are spoken in hushed amazement, while Eugene remains reserved. Moran drifts nearby, amused, noting that social interaction drains her master far more than battle ever could. The attention intensifies, with speculation about his appearance and lineage. Eugene feels unsettled, realizing that being mistaken for something non-human could complicate matters even further. A knight suddenly reaches a conclusion, observing that this explains Eugene's exceptional vision in darkness and heightened hearing. He becomes convinced that Eugene could never have been an ordinary human. Eugene listens in silence, carefully concealing the truth as suspicion begins to take shape around him. Galedic raises his voice during the banquet while holding a drink, openly marveling at the idea that elf blood might run through Eugene's veins. At the same time, Robin struggles awkwardly, trying to slip out of an uncomfortable group embrace. Galfredic studies Eugene's face with curiosity, wondering how someone with such striking features could have remained unnoticed for so long in this region. Eugene explains that he never intentionally concealed himself, but was simply shaped by circumstance. The response catches Galedic off guard, while the surrounding women and Robin grow visibly embarrassed by his boisterous behavior. Galedic casually comments on how effortlessly Eugene spoke to the ladies, clearly impressed. As Eugene calmly observes the scene, he realizes that beneath Galedic's carefree attitude lies a surprisingly sharp perception. He quietly concludes that, should suspicions arise in the future, claiming elven heritage might serve as a plausible explanation. His thoughts drift back to the moment he devoured the magic stone. He realizes that the act granted more than a new ability. It opened a deeper path. When the tattoo vanished from his body, Unfamiliar memories flooded his mind. In them, he sees himself in his current form, lying in an unknown place while a gentle hand holds his. Bells echo faintly as unseen figures watch over him. The image of a laughing woman remains vivid, leaving him confused about her identity and uncertain whether these memories are truly his. He remembers nothing of his past beyond a single name, Eugene. His thoughts are interrupted when Robin, trembling, calls out to him for help. Eugene turns to see Robin panicking, desperate to escape his predicament. Galedic grips Robin by the neck in rough play, scolding him harshly and mocking him as a burden. Robin screams in protest, justifying his earlier retreat by claiming any normal person would have fled. Galedic grows even more aggressive, twisting the moment into a lesson, questioning whether Robin is now calling Eugene a monster. While observing coldly, Eugene returns to his thoughts. The only certainty he possesses is his name, yet recent events awaken a new intuition. He realizes that removing the remaining tattoos, one by one, may reveal the truth of who he really is. As Robin's cries continue in the background, Eugene's gaze hardens with resolve. The scene shifts to Lord Tyen's room, where Eugene and Galedic arrive after reporting the successful suppression of the dungeon. Galedic introduces himself formally as Karima, Galedic's third son. Eugene follows, respectfully presenting himself as Jan, the eldest son of the Eugene family. Lord Tyen acknowledges the hardships they endured and orders their reward to be delivered, mentioning the certificate Eugene requested to verify his identity. Eugene receives the document confirming his status as Jan of the Eugene family and expresses his gratitude. As Miran quietly celebrates the success of their plan, Lord Tyen is suddenly overtaken by a violent coughing fit. His son Kamar rushes to his side. Lord Tyen weakly admits that the ambition of his second son weighs heavily on him. Kamar reassures him, promising to protect the territory his father built with sincerity. Holding his son's hand, Lord Tyen offers his final advice, explaining that land itself is meaningless and that a true lord must value something greater. His words linger as Vilai listens from the background. Soon after, Lord Tyen's hand falls limp, marking the end of his life. Eugene observes quietly. Though he did not know Lord Tyen well, many people grieve sincerely. Yet death does not move everyone equally. Eugene notices Bertel, the second son, whose expression reflects anger rather than sorrow. As the funeral proceeds, Galedic prepares to depart, apologizing to Kamar for leaving during such a critical time. Kamar understands. Galedic then asks Eugene whether he truly intends to remain behind. Eugene answers firmly, explaining that leaving now would waste the effort spent opening the dungeon. Galedic smiles regretfully, remarking that Count Evero would have wanted to meet someone like him. Galedic extends his hand, expressing his honor at having tested his strength against Eugene and hoping they meet again under better circumstances. Their handshake reflects mutual respect. Galedic departs on horseback as Robin wishes him a safe journey. Eugene then orders Bardic to prepare to leave. Vilide is confused, reminding Eugene that he said he would stay. Bardic asks what Galedic rode away on, and when Vilide answers that it was a horse, Bardic laughs and explains their plan to sell monster materials at the Merchant Guild and purchase a horse for Eugene. Vilide's eyes light up with excitement as he pledges his service as a squire. Eugene responds with a cold glance, making it clear that he will not need his help for now. Vilide is left stunned and confused. The scene shifts to Marin, the kingdom's largest trading city, bustling with activity. Vilide struggles under heavy boxes while workers shout at him to hurry. Nearby, Robin boasts loudly, drawing attention to the dungeon materials and pointing out Sir Jan Eugene. The crowd murmurs, recalling rumors of a rookie knight who cleared the dungeon and tore a troll apart barehanded. Inside the guild, Eugene meets Merchant Belmore, who enthusiastically offers full support in handling the materials. Eugene recalls his earlier doubts, but recognizes the value of a large guild, given his unfamiliarity with human society. Their discussion is interrupted when a well-dressed man storms in aggressively. Bardic quietly explains that the newcomer is a powerful secretary acting under the deputy manager of the guild. The man attempts to dominate the negotiation, dismissing rumors and belittling Eugene as an inexperienced knight. As he continues, the pressure from Eugene's presence overwhelms him. His confidence collapses into fear, and he hurriedly apologizes before fleeing the room. Belmore, moved by Eugene's decision to reject the deputy manager's offer, pledges unwavering support. Eugene instructs him to begin selling immediately, surprising him. Elsewhere, the secretary reports his failure to the deputy manager. She dismisses his excuses, smiling coldly and deciding to pressure Eugene through other means. Observing Eugene from afar, she orders the secretary to deliver him a gift too valuable for a penniless knight to refuse. Back with Eugene, Vilide is shocked when Eugene orders him to remain behind and assist Belmore with selling materials. Vilide asks why he must stay, questioning whether he lacks the strength to follow. Eugene cuts him off by questioning what it truly means to be a squire. Vilide responds enthusiastically, stating that his role as a squire is to assist the knight he serves in both combat and daily life. Eugene agrees. He then explains calmly, with a meaningful look, that his current task is to support him in everyday matters, including completing commercial responsibilities. Eugene clearly defines the task for Vilide. He is to sell the materials brought back from battle to raise necessary funds, coordinating with merchant Belmore, who will teach him the basics of business. Eugene assures him that Belmore will be a competent teacher in this field. Vilide reflects silently, realizing that without Sir Eugene, he likely would have been dead long ago, and that complaining about a simple task like this would be shameful. Eugene notices the boy's thoughts and offers him an extra incentive. Once the money is raised, he will seriously consider teaching him swordsmanship. Eugene adds that the time will come when Vilide will fight alongside him as his true squire. Vilide's eyes shine with both gratitude and enthusiasm as he places a hand on his chest, pledging to carry out Eugene's orders with full sincerity. Eugene leaves the shop, only to find himself completely broke after purchasing minimal equipment, marveling at how quickly money disappears. The fairy Miran flies around him, grumbling about her empty wallet and empty heart, urging him to earn money quickly. Eugene stops suddenly in front of a display window, staring at a shiny suit of armor. Bardic admires it, describing it as every knight's romance. Eugene raises an eyebrow, surprised, and asks if by romance he means expensive. Bardic explains that it's not only about the price, but also that such armor is valuable enough to be passed down through wealthy knight families for generations. The contemplation is cut short by a panic scream. Robin runs up, announcing that a massive horde of wandering monsters is approaching the outskirts of Marin City. He explains that these creatures are coming from the eastern forest and that the city's existing guild members are struggling to hold them back. Bardic suggests that Eugene participate in the subjugation operation. Eugene asks coldly why he should. Robin, now in a fighting stance, explains that unlike dungeon raids with an owner, subduing wandering monsters carries no commission fees. He adds eagerly that Marin City is filled with merchants and capital, making it the perfect opportunity to sell monster materials and loot at excellent prices without transport costs. In short, it is a chance for enormous profit. Eugene's expression changes immediately at the mention of money. Without hesitation, he issues the order to move. As they prepare to leave, someone blocks their path, screaming for them to wait. It is Secretary Grail, panting heavily beside a horse. He asks why they are running so fast and announces that he has come to deliver a gift from the deputy manager, a magnificent horse. Grail proudly presents the steed, highlighting its silky black fur and dense, sculpted muscles, confirming it is a high-quality thoroughbred. Eugene, surprised, wonders if the deputy manager specifically sent it for him. Grail notices the intimidating look in Eugene's eyes and steps back nervously, stammering that nothing is expected in return. Eugene ignores the secretary and strides toward the horse, mounting it gracefully. He instructs Grail to convey his thanks to his mistress. Grail watches, amazed, as Eugene rides off at tremendous speed. Miran screams in excitement, urging him to collect money. Robin and Bardic stand stunned at the horse's velocity. Robin hesitates, unsure of what to do now that Eugene has taken the lead, but Bardic orders him to run and catch up. Grail remains behind, silently observing their departure. In the forest on the eastern outskirts of Marin City, a bloody battle unfolds between humans and a horde of savage goblins. Suddenly, the sound of galloping hooves cuts through the chaos as Eugene appears, riding his new black. Miran immediately notes that the scale of the attack is far larger than anticipated and suspects the guild members defending the city's front lines have likely perished. Eugene's face hardens with determination. Seeing the situation play to his advantage, he dashes through the forest on his horse, driven by a clear, selfish purpose. He will claim all the loot for himself. In the distance, he spots a blonde knight struggling amidst the goblin horde. The knight shouts, calling the creatures demons and swearing they will not advance further except over his dead body. But sheer numbers overwhelm him. His horse stumbles, throwing him into the midst of enemies. The knight struggles to rise, declaring himself a righteous defender of Marin, but panic overtakes him as goblins surround him on all sides. His face twists in terror as he screams for rescue. At that critical moment, Eugene's sword descends like a thunderbolt, splitting the goblin poised to strike the knight in two. He storms the horde on horseback, swinging his sword with lightning speed, dispatching all monsters threatening the knight. Limbs fly through the air as Eugene fights with precision, widening a circle of safety. The knight looks on in amazement at his savior's sudden appearance. Eugene continues to fight efficiently, keeping the knight safe and clearing the immediate threat. The knight, catching his breath, offers a strange smile and admits he owes Eugene a debt, asking amidst the chaos for his name. Before the knight can answer, a goblin launches a treacherous attack from the shadows. Eugene intervenes instantly, cutting the creature down before it can strike. He looks at the knight coldly and asks, "Is knowing my name important right now? If you die here, everything becomes meaningless." The knight bursts into hysterical laughter, the truth of Eugene's words rekindling his fighting spirit. Rising once more, he threatens the goblins, declaring he will demand Eugene's name again if they survive this living hell. He is saved. After the battle, the citizens of Marin are curious about the unknown knight who saved them. The blonde knight steps forward, proudly declaring his name, Jan Eugene. Whispers of admiration ripple through the crowd as rumors of his heroics spread. How he ripped a troll's spine from its body alive, cementing his status as a new hero. Cheers for Jan Eugene rise throughout the city. From a high window, a man with red hair and a thick beard watches silently. Louis Violin, former representative of the Marin City Mayor's Guild, mutters ominously, noting that Eugene's growing fame will make him increasingly difficult to control. He turns to his granddaughter, Priscilla, asking anxiously if leaving things as they are is safe. She smiles slyly, confident that the situation remains manageable, and explains that she hopes Eugene's fame continues to rise. A knight who fears losing his status is easier to influence. Priscilla shifts the conversation, asking if Louis knew about the child accompanying Eugene. He confirms he does. The child is selling dungeon materials to the guild under Eugene's name. Priscilla reveals a dangerous truth. The child is an illegitimate, hidden son of the Tyan family. Louis's eyes widen as he realizes the implications. Priscilla adds that by maintaining close ties with Eugene and the child, they could secure a strong relationship with the future head of the Tyan family. Louis laughs, admiring her strategy, and decides to send a valuable gift to Lord Eugene to reward the hero who cleared the wandering monster threat. He promises to credit Priscilla as the recommender, allowing her to cement her influence. She thanks him and sips her tea calmly, pondering the ancient wisdom that a thirsty person always goes to water. She plans patiently, waiting for Eugene to drink from the well she offers. Soon, Eugene arrives, wearing new armor. Priscilla greets him with a broad smile, welcoming the hero of Marin City. Eugene bows slightly, offering thanks for her generosity. She invites him to sit and, while drinking tea, studies him discreetly, marveling that someone with such handsome features could possess the strength to rip a troll's head from its body. She praises his armor, noting that it fits perfectly and was commissioned under her supervision at the finest workshop in Marin. The armor is made from a special steel blending L's iron and ghoul bones, strong enough that even dragon fangs cannot easily pierce it. Eugene responds coldly that the armor will make his next dungeon raid safer. He also expresses appreciation for the accommodations and meals provided for his mercenaries, promising greater results in return. Priscilla smiles maliciously, pleased that her gifts were appreciated. She attempts to make a practical proposal, but Eugene interrupts by standing abruptly. "I am busy. I must go," he announces, leaving her stunned. As he moves toward the door, Eugene clarifies that once the Taiyan family dungeon raid is complete, many matters can be accomplished. Without turning back, he stresses that his current contract is limited to dungeon byproducts, hinting that this may be their last encounter. He adds coldly, "I will now focus on collecting magic stones." Priscilla bites her lip in anger and suddenly screams, demanding he wait. Eugene stops, turning to her with his glowing red eye. She drops her mask of politeness, revealing her true intentions. With a sharp glare, she lists the lavish gifts she has bestowed: the full plate armor, a purebred warhorse, luxury accommodations, and gourmet meals for his mercenaries. Pointing out that the dungeon byproducts he sold barely cover half the costs, she asks if he never learned that everything has a price, implying he is deeply indebted. Priscilla presses further, questioning whether Eugene is an unprincipled knight with no sense of honor, mocking him as the hero of Marin, while he stares at her coldly, revealing his darker, more terrifying side. She challenges him directly. Will he simply take everything and leave? Can he talk his way out of this? Eugene lets out a terrifying, mocking smile. Amused, he turns the confrontation on her, pointing out the irony. She's the one summoning people at her whim, forcing unwanted gifts upon them, and then demanding repayment. His eye glows crimson as he steps closer, declaring coldly, "You are merely a merchant." In that moment, he exudes true intimidation, leaving no doubt about who holds the power. A heavy silence and suffocating tension fill the room. Bardic and Belmore stand frozen, while sweat pours from Priscilla's brow. He speaks with deadly calm, making his stance clear before she can misinterpret him. He has already signed a contract with the Balan Merchant Guild through Belmore, and as long as they purchase his goods fairly, he does not care what Marin whispers behind his back. Eugene throws her own words at her. "Everything has a price. Chatter as you please." His crimson gaze sharpens, a silent warning. As deputy manager, she will soon learn the true meaning of paying that price. He continues, his voice slicing through the room, remarking that her behavior makes it seem as though the Balan Guild is conspiring with Marin City to trap the very knight who saved them. He delivers the final threat coldly. If this persists, no knight would dare step forward the next time Marin faces danger. With that, he declares he is finished here and turns to leave. Bardic, grinning slyly, bows slightly in mock regret toward the deputy manager. Priscilla finally realizes the gravity of her mistake. A different approach could have secured a powerful partnership, yet she has completely lost control. Belmore glances nervously at her, confirming her worst fears. Just as Eugene reaches the door, Priscilla calls out, her voice trembling. She bows deeply, hand over her heart, admitting her insolence and offering her sincerest apologies to Sir Eugene. She confesses that her greed for influence blinded her judgment and asks for a fresh start. She proposes a compromise. Keep the contract with Belmore as it is, adding a single clause ensuring Eugene's concerns are never realized. Silently, Priscilla assesses Eugene. She has seen countless knights grovel for luxury and fame, chasing wealth like fools. But he is entirely different. Too dangerous to manipulate, too independent to control. Her instincts as a merchant scream that she cannot afford to lose him. Eugene stops, regarding her steadily. "I will listen," he says, though his red eye gleams with a sharp warning. Whatever she offers must be worth his time. Priscilla smiles gratefully, thankful for the reprieve and the chance to make amends. Later, Eugene rides his new horse, the fairy Miran circling above him in admiration. Even if it's just for show, she gushes, "He looks magnificent." She fawns, proclaiming him the greatest in the world. Bardic, grinning broadly, remarks that Eugene has secured an excellent contract. Eugene nods, while Bardic gestures toward a map, explaining the massive reach of the Balan Merchant Guild, with headquarters in Marin and hundreds of branches across the Roman Empire. He notes that trading with nobles who rule demonic realms, like the Tyan family, is invaluable. Bardic admires the offer. Unrestricted access to any dungeon connected to the guild is more advantageous than official noble support. Eugene, annoyed, replies that he only said all that earlier because he was irritated. Their conversation is interrupted by a coarse voice mocking Eugene's shiny armor. A massive, bald mercenary steps forward, sneering at Eugene's appearance and doubting his ability to wield his sword properly. Eugene meets him with cold contempt, while Miran comments disdainfully, likening him to a potato spouting nonsense. At that moment, Kamar arrives. Eugene addresses him as Lord Tyan, but Kamar deflects politely, inviting him to speak freely and noting the remarkable changes in Eugene over such a short time. Eugene inquires about the situation. Kamar explains that his brother has not backed down and has hired new mercenaries, though something feels off. Eugene recalls the mercenaries his brother previously employed to kidnap Villi, corrupt and foul-smelling. Scrutinizing the new group, he notes that they lack the same vile stench. Kamar formally requests Eugene to lead the dungeon raid as commander. The bald mercenary interrupts rudely, asking Kamar if he intends to take command should Eugene die inside. Shock ripples through Kamar and the knights. The mercenary smirks maliciously, asserting that the dungeon is no picnic and that lives there are cheaper than flies, preparing for the worst. Eugene replies coldly, agreeing with the mercenary's sentiment, and mockingly calls him Baldy, enraging the man. He then orders everyone to move out. Miran buzzes anxiously around him, warning of the mercenary, but Eugene reassures her with a calm glance. He realizes Bertiel is scheming to use these mercenaries to eliminate him within the dungeon. A terrifying, demonic smile creeps across Eugene's face, anticipating the collapse of Bertiel's plan. Miran laughs wickedly, sensing her master's intent. Eugene charges forward, slicing through monsters with supreme skill. Limbs and blood scatter in every direction as he forges a path alone, while the bald mercenary watches in shock. Rumors of Eugene's strength were no exaggeration. Leading from the front, Eugene serves as a human shield, clearing the way while the mercenaries hang back. Grinding his teeth in frustration, the bald man examines his poison-coated blade, knowing a single scratch could end Eugene's life, but he finds no opening. Eugene halts abruptly before a dark entrance, announcing that only mid-rank monsters appear beyond this point, and he can no longer guarantee their safety. Eugene turns to the group with a sharp gaze, his red eye glowing ominously. Only those who wish to follow me do so, he warns. Only if you are confident you can keep up. The bald mercenary shouts at his comrades, incredulous that the commander would venture alone. To him, this is a golden opportunity to execute his plan. With enthusiasm and greed, the others decide to follow. Bardic and Robin, however, choose to hang back, observing carefully. Bardic notes silently that Sir Eugene seems to be planning something unusual this time. Eugene's thoughts drift briefly to the last dungeon raid alongside the formidable knight Galedic. Without him, Eugene admits to himself, there is no thrill, no true challenge. He recalls Galedic's exceptional leadership, how he raised soldiers' morale in dire moments and took on the deadliest tasks himself. Regret flickers briefly. Had Galedic been present, even this motley group of mercenaries might have cleared the dungeon. Eugene wonders how his old companion would act in this very moment. Abruptly, Eugene drops the charade, his cold voice cutting through the tension. If you wish to die, proceed as you please. Miran appears before the group, a sudden apparition that sends the mercenaries into a panic. Her water magic lashes out in a deadly flurry, each strike precise and unrelenting. Screams erupt as the mercenaries dodge desperately, some falling to the lethal torrents. Chaos reigns. The clashing of swords, cries of pain, and shouts of confusion fill the darkness. The bald mercenary screams at his men to stop, fearing a misstep that could cut him down. But Eugene moves silently, efficiently eliminating one mercenary after another. Shadows conceal him, his crimson eyes glinting in the darkness. Another cries, "I can't see," while terror spreads among them. Amidst the panic, one mercenary finally realizes the horrifying truth. "Is that our ally?" He screams, a leg severed, pain flooding his voice. But the figure advancing in the darkness is no ally. Eugene, fangs bared, moves like a predator, striking without hesitation. The bald mercenary finds himself alone, encircled by the silent aftermath. He fumbles for a magic stone to illuminate the area, cursing the darkness he had not anticipated. He calls for his comrades, but only absolute silence greets him. His fear grows, and bewilderment grips him. He cannot tell hunter from prey. Eugene approaches slowly. "Do you need a little light?" he asks, his voice cold and mocking. "Can you see clearly now?" The mercenary stares in terror as realization dawns. He has been outmatched, trapped in the predator's world. One word escapes his trembling lips. "You monster!" Later, Kamar bursts into Eugene's room, shocked and eager. "Is it true?" he calls, disbelief written across his features. Bertiel and Kamar arrive at the scene, only to find the mercenary maverick lying in a pitiful, bloodied state. Burl cries out, horrified at the sight of someone meant to be strong reduced to this. Maverick's voice trembles as he admits that he attempted to kill Jan Eugene. Before Burl can respond, Maverick delivers the shocking truth. He acted under the direct orders of Burl Teon himself. Burl breaks into a cold sweat, scrambling to regain control, insisting the man has lost his mind. Kamar screams at his brother, rage burning in his voice. Burl replies sharply, attempting to deflect, urging Kamar not to believe a madman. Approaching Maverick, Burl attempts to regain authority, demanding clarity. But within Maverick, a terrifying struggle rages. His eyes glow with a strange red light, the weight of magic or supernatural fear twisting his mind. Finally, he screams that he is useless and deserves death, leaping from the balcony. He lands on a statue below, impaled instantly. Horrified, Kamar and others witness Maverick's lifeless body. Bertiel, however, exploits the situation, claiming the man lost his sanity after witnessing the carnage, trying to rationalize the scene. Kamar notices a sinister gleam in his brother's eyes, relief at the death of the only witness. Burl lashes out at Eugene, accusing him of fabricating delusions and persecution, questioning Eugene's pride as a knight. Eugene, cold and resolute, interrupts, demanding with a sharp gaze if Bertiel truly stakes his honor and truth as a knight. Burl affirms, tense and restrained. Eugene seizes the moment. "Since you wager your honor and truth, I request a trial by combat to settle this," he declares. Bertiel is stunned, enraged, backed into a corner by the sudden demand. Rumors of the trial spread throughout the castle as the sun sets. Whispers fill the halls. Bertiel has gone too far. The next day, Eugene appears in the front courtyard, fully armored, ready for combat. The crowd realizes the target is the knight Bertiel recently hired. Sir Jan Eugene stands firm, sword in hand, a mixture of rage and calm on his face. The referee announces the duel. Since the parties' claims conflict strongly, the truth shall be determined through this duel. Victory belongs to the truthful. Eugene draws his sword calmly, the gleam of steel reflecting the rising tension. Bertiel charges, a frontal assault of raw power. Eugene blocks with skill unmatched, sparks flying as their swords clash. Burl attacks savagely, strain etched across his face, pressing hard to break Eugene's defense. But Eugene begins to recall his past life, mocking the memory of being pursued for over 10 years by someone so weak. Rage courses through him, sharpening his strikes. The courtyard becomes a storm of steel, sparks, and awe. Bertiel's shock grows with every unmatched move. He realizes he cannot match the speed, precision, or ferocity of the man standing before him, Sir Jan Eugene. Eugene pressed with a sweeping attack, delivering a powerful blow that made Bertiel stagger and cry out in pain. He followed up with lightning-fast strikes, blocking Bertiel's attacks with complete ease, then countering with a thrust that knocked him off balance. Bertiel's sword fell from his hand. Eugene stood over him with a cold, terrifying look, contemptuously ordering him to pick up his sword and continue the fight, while Bertel trembled in humiliation and pain. Eugene analyzed his opponent, noting that Bertel's swordsmanship was not bad in itself, but the difference in power was clear. Even the commoners watching, knowing nothing of dueling, could see that Eugene was overwhelmingly stronger. He swung his sword and severed Bertel's hand. Suddenly, Kamar shouted for a halt. Eugene turned toward him with an annoyed look, insisting the duel was not over. Kamar explained he could not watch his brother die, but since Bertel was unable to fight or prove his claim, the winner was Sir Eugene. Bertel knelt on the ground, bleeding, refusing to accept defeat, screaming that he could still fight. Kamar interrupted firmly, telling him to stop, explaining the result had already been decided, and asked him to confess his sin as a knight and accept imprisonment instead of death. Bertel lost his mind, screaming at his brother and demanding to know what he had done to deserve this. He turned his rage toward Eugene, blaming him for all his humiliation. In a moment of madness, Bertel tried to attack again, but Eugene moved with lightning speed. Bertel could not control his body. His head fell to the ground, and he saw his own body lying there, realizing in horror that Eugene had severed his neck with a single strike. Eugene stood over him, coldly noting that he should have seized the last chance his brother had given him, and left the square. Kamar looked sorrowfully at his brother's body, calling him a fool. Later, Eugene walked through the castle corridors. Miran asked if what he did had been a waste. Eugene asked what she meant. She clarified she was referring to the mercenary Maverick, noting that he had turned him into a thrall vampire and then discarded him. Eugene explained that Maverick had been mentally weak and could not handle the transformation properly. Leaving him alive would have made it easy for others to discover he had become a vampire. Eugene stated that Maverick was merely a convenient, disposable tool to bring Bertel into the trial by combat. He asked if she truly believed he would spare someone who had bared fangs at him. Miran remarked that such behavior was expected of a vampire without blood or tears, and argued that a vampire should possess countless slaves as a symbol of power. Eugene briefly replied that he did not need them, and she mocked him, saying he understood nothing of style. Eugene opened a door slowly, thinking that turning weaklings into subordinates required too much cleanup effort later, wishing there were at least one person he liked. He remembered someone who had gained his admiration and heard a voice inside the room asking about Galedic. Eugene entered the room where Priscilla sat with Belmore. Priscilla asked Belmore about Galedic's entry, and he nervously explained that things were chaotic and that 2 weeks had already passed. Both Priscilla and Belmore were shocked to see Eugene suddenly before them. Belmore welcomed him warmly, congratulating him on his success in subduing the dungeon, and Eugene returned the greeting curtly. Eugene immediately asked about Sir Galedic. Priscilla, serious, explained that Galedic had participated 2 weeks ago in subduing a maze in Count Evero's territory. She revealed that he had gone missing alone inside the maze. They had combed the entire mid-rank monster area, but found no trace, suggesting he might have entered the high-rank monster area and failed to return. The scene shifted to a luxurious palace, where an elegant man welcomed Eugene, noting he had heard many rumors and that Eugene looked younger and more handsome than expected. Eugene thanked Lord Jiffin for the welcome, but reminded him of the urgency of the situation. Jiffian Evergrow, the eldest son of the Evergrow family, invited Eugene inside and explained that Sir Galeford's ambition had crossed the line. They had planned to grant him a title if he succeeded in the subjugation, but they never imagined he would enter the upper floors alone. Eugene was stunned. Jiffian confirmed that the upper floors Galedic entered had been untouched by the Evergrow family for over 100 years. He added quietly that the area was the residence of the so-called Maze Master. Another person explained that the Maze Master was not just a resident, but the entity controlling the entire maze. They noted that Galedic, blinded by greed for merit, had made a reckless move that caused trouble for many. Jiffian introduced Sir Lugotz, one of the territory knights who had led the subjugation with Galedic. Lugotz greeted Eugene with a sly smile, noting rumors that Eugene had defeated Galedic in a duel and observing an unexpected resemblance between them. Lugotz announced he was the champion of the Evergrow tournament, implying he had defeated Galedic there as well, which they had in common. Eugene asked coldly if that was important now. Jiffian ignored Eugene's annoyance, explaining that it only proved how valuable Galedic was to them, and apologized with fake sincerity. Eugene asked about Galedic's current fate. Jiffian promised Eugene full support as a friend who had traveled far, asking him to listen carefully. He explained that their family had tried exploring the upper floors many times over the last 100 years, but everyone always disappeared. Their policy was to end the search and declare dead anyone missing for more than a month. Jiffian asked if Eugene understood, noting that 3 weeks had passed since Galedic's disappearance, and if he was not found within the remaining week, there would be no hope. Eugene immediately stood, announcing he would set off. Jiffian tried to calm him, explaining that the maze could not be entered like a town square. He added that Sir Lugots would prepare the subjugation team in 3 days and advised Eugene to rest until then. Eugene remained silent for a moment, then agreed and thanked Jiffian. Jiffian added one final request. He had recently hired a witch and asked Eugene to include her in the mission, confirming she would be very useful. The scene shifted to the city streets, where Miran grumbled furiously about Lugots, calling him a pointy-headed fool with terrible manners. She fumed, noting that they might seem missing a few screws, but were actually formidable, threatening to burn his large nose with fire. Eugene looked ahead coldly, ignoring her chatter. Eugene sank into deep thought, noticing that many things did not add up logically. He recalled Galedic's words before they parted, remembering clearly that Galedic had said he would receive his official appointment from Count Evergrow once the maze campaign succeeded, and had invited Eugene to accompany him to present himself. Eugene wondered why. If Galedic had confirmed the title and was heading to Evergrow territory, he was suddenly assigned to another maze campaign. He was certain that the man he knew well would not act recklessly out of greed and would have formed a proper team and proceeded with extreme caution. His thoughts were interrupted by commotion and screaming. Eugene turned to see a masked man shouting to the crowd, proclaiming that the Messiah would descend upon them. The man continued passionately, warning of a day when a red shadow would fall on the moon, incurring the wrath of the goddess of victories and leading her to destroy the land. He claimed the disaster had already begun, pointing to frequent tremors near the maze that caused monster deaths. The preacher also mentioned that a skilled knight had gone missing recently, which caught Eugene's attention. Miran whispered that this matched exactly what the palace sources had reported. The man demanded that the people sprinkle fresh calf blood at the gate and offer leftover meat as a sacrifice, promising that the Messiah would descend to save the bloodstained land. Some bystanders wondered if it was a religious cult, while Miran felt confused by their talk. Eugene, however, noticed immediately that the village's atmosphere was abnormal. One follower approached him and slipped a leaflet into his hand, warning of divine wrath and inviting belief before it was too late. Eugene read about the monster deaths caused by earthquakes near the maze and wondered if part of it had collapsed. He deduced that monsters might be escaping through cracks, but questioned why Galedic had disappeared if that were the case. He made a sudden decision, ordering Miran to prepare to head to the maze immediately. She was surprised. Eugene declared that waiting 3 days was too long and that he would begin the search himself, prepared to clear everything in his path. Suddenly, a mysterious voice came from behind, expressing surprise at seeing a vampire there. Eugene was shocked, eyes widening. A cloaked figure appeared, smiling maliciously and mocking the idea that vampires were nearly extinct due to the Holy Knight's campaigns, questioning how Eugene could move freely in daylight. While the preacher continued in the background, Eugene grabbed the figure, dragging him away from the crowd and pinning him against a wall. He pressed the man's neck and demanded his identity, threatening to break it if he did not speak. The man, struggling for breath, admitted that he belonged to Blood Shadows. Miran, hearing the name, felt a strange familiarity and screamed in shock, rushing to stop Eugene from killing him. She explained that the man was a mage, revealing that Blood Shadows were a lineage of mages who had served vampires for generations. While she spoke, the mage lost consciousness from strangulation. Miran commented with regret that he had passed out. Moments later, the witch regained consciousness and scolded Eugene for attacking without understanding, asking how she could respond while his hand crushed her throat. Eugene apologized, embarrassed, while Miran defended him, noting that the witch had first spoken in an aggressive tone. The witch calmed and introduced herself as Sarinoa, a Blood Shadows mage who served vampires and could sense their presence immediately. She explained she had been looking for Eugene at young Master Jiffian's request, confirming she was the witch Jiffian had mentioned. Sarinoa added that Jiffian told her Eugene and Galdic shared a deep bond, which irritated Eugene. Sarinoa revealed her real reason for being there. She had been present during Galdic's campaign and had witnessed the moment he went missing. She explained that she volunteered for Count Evero's campaign to collect monster materials, noting that the Evergrow maze was dangerous. Most areas had been cleared over the past century, except for the upper floors, so the team felt relatively safe. But as they went deeper, the maze shook violently from a sudden earthquake. She described the moment her ground collapsed, nearly sending her into the abyss. At that critical moment, Galdic, guarding the rear, intervened, saving her but falling himself. She remembered his scream as he fell, calling her a fool and warning of danger below. Everyone except her believed the earthquake occurred because Galdic opened the upper floor gate. She felt it was her duty to tell Eugene, Galdic's close friend, the truth. She noted she had not expected Eugene to be a vampire, making Jiffian's story seem inconsistent. Eugene wondered if Jiffian had lied or if the story had been distorted. Sarinoa interrupted his thoughts with further information. She had seen something in the abyss where Galdic fell. She described a huge eye in the depths, and Eugene was stunned, questioning what it could be. She confirmed her observation and reminded him of the leaflets distributed by the cult earlier, noting that the eye resembled the drawing on those leaflets. Meanwhile, cult followers were performing rituals, and a priest demanded blood and meat offerings on an altar, while a sinister face appeared in the darkness, muttering words that suggested something would soon rise. Back in daylight, the square bustled with activity as workers moved food supply barrels. Announcements confirmed that preparations were complete and that mercenary volunteers and Templar Knights were ready for immediate deployment. Eugene stood before the huge maze gate amidst the alert crowds. Liggett asked if he was excited to meet his close friend, expressing hope they would not have to carry his corpse back. Eugene corrected him, affirming that Galdic was not the type to die easily. Liggett laughed loudly, stating that Sir Galdic was very reliable. Eugene thought to himself that if it were up to him, he would have entered the maze long ago. Recalling the image of the mysterious eye symbol, he realized that Galdic's disappearance was not a simple accident and resolved to watch him closely. Remembering his past experiences with Galdic, he reminded himself that his friend had survived 3 weeks in a maze, so he could endure another 3 days. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a group of masked men who greeted him respectfully, surprising him. They introduced themselves as Templar Knights from the monastery in Evergrow territory, expressing honor in serving alongside a devoted knight like Eugene. Their leader praised him for his readiness to face danger for a friend and invited him to fight together. Miran whispered sarcastically at the idea of describing a vampire as pious. Eugene responded coldly, acknowledging their support and asking them to do their best. As Eugene walked away, Liggett commented sarcastically on the unusual behavior of the Templar Knights, joking that Eugene could change his class to Holy Knight. Eugene imagined the title Vampire Holy Knight with a wry sarcasm, but his expression soon turned serious. He called his mercenary captain Bardic to give quick instructions. Inside the maze, commanders ordered soldiers to pause, drink water, and then return to positions without lowering defenses. Miran flew around in awe of the internal waterfalls, remarking on the space's stunning appearance and abundant water energy, while Eugene observed silently. He analyzed the environment and concluded it was an artificially created space rather than a natural dungeon, explaining why survival was possible with relatively few monsters. He considered the worst-case scenarios and realized that someone could hide and survive for a long time in a maze like this. Liggett commented that the place seemed perfect for evil things to lurk and thrive and asked Eugene for his opinion. Ignoring his response, Liggett praised Eugene for keeping everyone alive on their way here. Eugene then asked directly about the remaining distance to where Galdic had gone missing. Luggett smiled suspiciously and reminded Eugene not to be impatient, pointing out that he had said he trusted Galedic. Eugene and Miran shot him sharp looks, but Luggett continued confidently, claiming that the person Eugene should trust now was himself and that the Evergrow family had uncovered every trap in the maze. Eugene responded with sarcasm, noting that people still seemed to die frequently. Luggett chuckled faintly, eyes shining with a demonic glint, describing those deaths as sacrifices offered to pass safely. Eugene's eyes glowed crimson as he stared at Jiffian and Luggett. Suddenly, the earth shook violently. Stones fell from the ceiling, and soldiers panicked, fearing an earthquake. Luggett shouted for everyone to brace themselves, explaining that the maze structure was shifting and moving. He pointed to a massive wall with complex mechanisms, indicating the intended location. Huge gears turned and walls shifted, revealing a new path. Luggett explained that this area, where the walls changed constantly, contained a shortcut to the upper levels. As rocks fell around them, Sarinoa called out in amazement at the sudden earthquake revealing the path. Eugene asked Luggett about the shortcut's location. Luggett pointed with an evil smile, indicating the path lay beneath Eugene's feet. Mechanical gears turned, and the ground split. Eugene realized the earthquake was a stage trap set by Luggett, who had previously trapped Galedic and framed him. Sarinoa screamed in panic, pointing towards something ahead. Eugene's eyes widened in shock and rage as he saw Galedic bound with ropes, covered in blood, lying on a stone platform resembling a cross. Eugene rushed forward with lightning speed. He checked his friend and confirmed he was still alive, deciding to get him out and provide treatment immediately. Miran warned of something unnatural in the place, sensing strange energy emanating from the abyssal depths. A strong wind blew through the chamber. Two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, and a huge monster emerged, surrounded by a terrifying purple aura. Its steps shook the space. Sarinoa, terrified, realized it was a minotaur and questioned how such a monster could be here. Eugene ordered her to protect Galedic while he rushed toward the creature. He used flying rocks to reach the minotaur's head, but it launched a thunderous attack, sending him flying through the air and falling violently. The minotaur stood tall, weapon radiating dark energy, prepared to crush them. Eugene clung to the wall, observing cautiously as the monster aimed a crushing blow at the bound Galedic. He rushed desperately to save his friend, reaching out and screaming his name. Suddenly, a magic barrier blocked Eugene's path. He glared at Sarinoa in anger, asking sharply why she interfered. She apologized but insisted she could not allow a vampire to charge blindly at such a monster. Sarinoa explained that attacking the Minotaur directly would leave zero chance of victory and urged Eugene to assess the situation calmly. She expressed shock at the monster's presence, noting that the maze should not be large enough to harbor a Minotaur. The scene shifts to the outside of the labyrinth. While waiting there, Luggate reports that provisions are fully stocked and that the volunteer mercenaries and Templars have all assembled, ready to move at a moment's notice. Laughing, he then remarks on Eugene's condition, wondering how he feels and whether he is excited about reuniting with his close friend, adding that he hopes they will not end up carrying back a corpse. He dismisses the concern lightly, stating that Galedic is not the type to die easily, and laughs again, noting how much trust Eugene places in him. Watching Lugates, Eugene reflects inwardly that he wanted to enter the labyrinth much sooner. However, once he realized that Galedic's disappearance was not a simple accident, he decided he needed to keep a close watch on Lugates. He reassures himself that Galedic survived for 3 weeks already and should be able to hold on for 3 more days. At that moment, a group of Templars arrives. Their leader greets Eugene respectfully, introducing them as Templars from the monastery underhouse, Evergrow, and expressing their honor at serving alongside a knight they consider pious. Stepping closer, the leader states that they were deeply moved by Eugene's willingness to face danger for a friend and expresses their resolve to fight together in the name of God. Observing the Templars, Miriam reacts inwardly with disbelief at the idea of a vampire being called pious. Eugene responds calmly and lightly, acknowledging them and suggesting they do their best. Lugates laughs again, commenting that Templars usually follow divine orders and rarely show interest in ordinary knights. He jokes that Eugene might consider changing his class to a paladin one day. Hearing this, Eugene imagines the absurdity of becoming a vampire paladin. The group then advances toward the gate of the labyrinth. Eugene calls Bardic aside briefly, and Bardic responds immediately. Once inside the labyrinth, the commander orders the soldiers to hold their position, remain alert, resupply water, and return to their posts without lowering their guard. As Eugene looks deeper into the labyrinth, Miriam marvels at the environment, noting how beautiful it is and how strongly it overflows with water energy. Eugene studies the surroundings carefully and concludes inwardly that this place is clearly different from an ordinary dungeon. It is an artificial space designed to allow at least minimal survival, with a reasonable population of monsters. He considers that if the worst were to happen, it would be possible to survive by hiding in a labyrinth like this. Lugates approaches Eugene and remarks that it is indeed the perfect place for wretches to hide. He compliments Eugene's abilities, noting that they made it this far without a single casualty. Eugene asks how much farther it is to the location where Galedic disappeared. With a casual smile, Lugates tells him not to be so impatient and reminds him that Eugene himself claimed to trust Galedic. Eugene fixes him with a serious stare. Lugates continues, stating that the person Eugene should trust most right now is him, repeating that House Evergrow has already mapped out all the traps in the labyrinth. Eugene points out that despite this claim, there seem to be casualties every time. Laughing quietly, Lugates dismisses this, referring to those deaths as sacrifices offered to the labyrinth in hopes of traversing it safely. The protagonist stared at him with visible anger. At that moment, the ground inside the labyrinth began to tremble. He immediately observed the movement and recognized that the shaking was not ordinary. Lugates ordered everyone to brace themselves, explaining that the structure of the labyrinth itself was shifting. Lugates then informed the protagonist that they had reached the zone where the walls constantly moved, the same area where a shortcut to the upper level existed. Cyranoa sensed something unusual about the tremor and tried to speak, but the protagonist walked forward instead, confused by the lack of any visible path. Lugates calmly explained that the shortcut was located exactly beneath where the protagonist was standing. The ground beneath him suddenly began shaking more violently. Cyranoa panicked as the instability increased. The protagonist quickly realized that the earthquake was artificial. He understood that Galfordic had fallen into a trap that Lugates already knew about, though the purpose behind it remained unclear. Cyranoa pointed toward something behind them. When the protagonist turned around, he was shocked by what he saw. Galfordic lay there, badly injured. Fear flashed through his mind as he rushed forward. After reaching him, the protagonist checked his pulse and confirmed that Galfordic was still alive. He believed that if he could pull him out and treat him in time, he could be saved. At the same time, Miriam rushed toward the protagonist, sensing something strange. Cyranoa also felt that something was wrong. Miriam explained that deep underground, she had been sensing a presence different from anything else. Suddenly, strong winds began blowing through the labyrinth. Cyranoa was alarmed by the unnatural airflow. Without warning, a massive monster burst through the labyrinth walls, revealing itself in front of them. Cyranoa immediately recognized it as a minotaur and was confused as to why such a creature existed in that place. The protagonist ordered Cyranoa to protect Galfordic and moved forward to confront the monster. He launched a powerful strike, but the minotaur blocked the attack with ease and hurled the protagonist away. The monster then drew its sword and drove it into the ground. The protagonist barely managed to hold onto the wall and noticed the monster's strange action. The impact shattered the ground beneath them, breaking it apart. Galfordic fell downward into the collapsing floor. The protagonist leaped after him instinctively, but before he could reach him, Cyranoa created a shield that stopped the protagonist from falling further into the abyss. The protagonist became furious at the interference. Cyranoa explained that the creature was a minotaur, a top-tier beast even among high-ranking monsters. He stated that even a vampire would not survive recklessly charging such an enemy, and that acting blindly offered almost no chance of victory. He insisted that if the protagonist truly wanted to save Galfordic, he needed to remain calm. Suddenly, Cyranoa realized something was wrong. He questioned whether the labyrinth was even large enough to house a minotaur, stating that he had expected at most a cyclops. From a distance, Lugates watched the situation unfold with a smile. He noted that he had not expected the mage to be capable of earth magic. He remarked that the mage had barely survived thanks to Galfredik, and that he had always assumed the man was merely an odd individual who only knew how to create chimeras. Lugates approached the protagonist together with the Templars and calmly remarked on the mage's ability to use earth magic, questioning whether Cyranoa had truly intended to save Galfredik. Cyranoa reacted with frustration, explaining that everything had happened too quickly at the time. Suddenly, the protagonist grabbed Lugates by the neck, realizing that he was the one responsible for Galfredik's condition. Lugates remained composed and explained that he had merely reunited the Lord's friend with him, acting on Galfredik's desire to meet. He then calmly grasped the protagonist's wrist, the same hand holding his neck, and commented on the protagonist's rough behavior. The protagonist was shocked by the strength behind Lugates' grip. Lugates forcefully removed the hand from his neck and pushed the protagonist back. Cyranoa reacted in alarm as the protagonist quickly realized that the monstrous strength Lugates displayed was not originally his own. Cyranoa explained that the crest Lugates possessed was a form of inherited magic, a power originally meant for humans to pass strength between themselves. Over time, as it began drawing power from non-human beings, it became completely forbidden. Lugates reacted with anger to this explanation, dismissing the idea of forbidden magic as cowardly reasoning created by those who wish to monopolize power. He declared that those chosen by God were destined to survive when despair engulfed the world. The protagonist understood the situation clearly. He realized that Lugates had borrowed another being's power to defeat Galfredik and had presented it as his own. Fueled by anger, the protagonist decided to make Lugates recognize his true position. Activating his power, the protagonist advanced to attack. The immense energy radiating from him stunned Cyranoa, who questioned whether a normal vampire could truly emit such overwhelming force. Lugates blocked the attack with ease and remarked that the protagonist was not the only one hiding his power. He then struck the protagonist with a powerful blow, followed by another palm strike that sent him flying far through the air. Lugates made it clear that he had no intention of holding back. Suddenly, the ground beneath them collapsed. Both the protagonist and Cyranoa fell into a pit. From above, Lugates mocked them, stating that all the traps within the labyrinth had already been exposed and ordering the protagonist to fall quietly. As they descended, the protagonist called out to Cyranoa. Cyranoa quickly created a magical circle beneath them in an attempt to stop their fall. From below, the protagonist hurled a broken piece of his sword upward. The fragment struck Lugates, cutting his face. As Lugates watched them fall deeper into the pit, he reflected inwardly on the protagonist's strength. Though he had heard rumors, the power displayed far exceeded his expectations. He acknowledged that a direct confrontation would not have guaranteed victory and that using Galfredik as bait instead of killing him outright had been the correct decision. With that, he prepared for what he believed would be the final sacrifice. Meanwhile, Cyranoa struggled to form additional magical circles to slow their descent. He apologized, explaining that the magic circle could no longer be sustained. Both he and the protagonist eventually crashed onto the ground below. As the protagonist began moving away, Cyranoa called out, confused and alarmed, asking where he was going. While trying to take in their surroundings, Cyranoa was overwhelmed by the environment, realizing they had fallen into a place that felt like a living hell. Cyranoa moved forward after the protagonist, troubled by his own hesitation. As he advanced, regret filled his thoughts, questioning why he had intervened at all instead of pretending not to know and fleeing when unease first settled in. As he continued forward, he suddenly noticed the protagonist approaching him while carrying Galfredik in his arms. The sight startled him. The protagonist directly asked Cyranoa whether he could save Galfredik. Cyranoa hesitated, admitting that healing magic was not his specialty. The protagonist pressed him further, making it clear that his hesitation was not an answer. After a moment, Cyranoa resolved to do everything he could. At that moment, Miriam appeared and urgently reported that she had checked the surroundings and found no exit. The protagonist questioned whether there were any walls that could be broken through. Miriam confirmed there were none and explained that the place felt like the very end of a labyrinth, an isolated boss room. After a brief pause, Miriam added that there was something more important she had sensed earlier. She explained that despite the overwhelming water energy in the area, she could not control any of it. As a water spirit, this limitation felt unnatural, especially concerning a blood puddle nearby that possessed a completely different consistency. Something on the wall then caught the protagonist's attention. As he observed it closely, he realized the shapes resembled eyes. He understood that this must have been what Cyranoa had sensed deep underground earlier. The protagonist questioned Miriam about her inability to control the substance. Miriam explained that she could theoretically only control the blood of the dead, which meant that the owner of this blood was still alive. At that moment, the massive monster emerged once again from the pool of blood. The sight filled Cyranoa with fear. The protagonist drew his swords and instructed Miriam to find an escape route, no matter the cost. Miriam immediately acknowledged the order. Standing firmly before the monster, the protagonist focused inwardly, while Cyranoa worked on healing Galfredik. Cyranoa recognized that Galfredik was still unable to move and understood that stabilizing him was the priority. The protagonist advanced and launched repeated sword strikes at the monster. Despite the relentless assault, his blades shattered under the strain. The monster retaliated, attacking fiercely, but the protagonist managed to dodge several blows before being struck directly and thrown back by a powerful hit. As he looked at the monster, the protagonist realized that ordinary weapons could not even scratch it. Accepting this, he resolved to adapt. He formed a magical sword and charged again, delivering powerful swings that struck the monster multiple times. Despite the effort, the monster countered with a devastating blow that sent the protagonist crashing to the ground. Seeing this, Cyranoa grew desperate and urged Galfredik to regain consciousness, reminding him that his friend was in danger. As the protagonist struggled to rise, he acknowledged inwardly that Cyranoa had been right. This high-grade monster existed on a completely different level of strength. Before he could fully recover, the monster attacked again with overwhelming force. Cyranoa called out in alarm as the protagonist stood before the towering creature. The protagonist reflected on the familiar feeling of powerlessness, a sensation he had endured for over a decade. It should not have felt new, yet something about it now felt different. Suddenly, the monster hurled magical spears toward him. One struck its mark, sending the protagonist crashing to the ground, blood spilling as his strength faded. Lying there, barely conscious, the protagonist questioned inwardly why the pain felt far worse than before, unable to understand why this suffering surpassed everything he had endured in the past. Cyranoa looked at the fallen protagonist and felt despair settle deep within him. He recalled his own warning, fully convinced that even as a vampire, there was no possible way for Eugene to defeat a monster of that level. As he assessed their surroundings, the realization struck him that there was nowhere left to run. His gaze shifted back to the roaring monster, and a quiet acceptance filled his thoughts. He wondered if this was truly how his life would end. Overcome with regret, he apologized inwardly to his master, believing that his own unworthiness had led him to this moment. At that instant, Galfredik regained consciousness. Disoriented, he noticed Eugene and immediately understood what had happened. He cursed under his breath, realizing that Eugene had been dragged into this situation because of him. Cyranoa urged Galfredik to escape while they still could, but Galfredik refused. He explained that Lugates had deliberately used him as bait to draw Eugene out, and that Eugene had been the true target from the beginning. He admitted that his own foolish pride, boasting about being Eugene's closest friend, had turned him into a liability. In his weakness, he believed he had caused everything. As his thoughts drifted inward, Galfredik reflected on their bond. What could have been a fleeting connection had become something far more meaningful to him. Eugene's strength and inner resolve had captivated him instantly. He had not wanted to lose that bond and had wished to grow strong enough to stand proudly at Eugene's side. Struggling to rise, Galfredik acknowledged that everything seemed to be ending now. With what strength he had left, he grabbed Cyranoa and threw him backward, forcing distance between him and the danger. Cyranoa cried out in shock as he was sent away. At the same time, the monster hurled magical spears toward Galfredik. Standing still, Galfredik accepted his fate, offering a final silent apology to Eugene. He wished that in another life, he could become a knight worthy of serving him properly as a true friend. Suddenly, Eugene regained consciousness. A massive explosion erupted as his energy surged outward, shaking the surroundings. In an instant, he launched himself toward the monster and struck with overwhelming force, severing one of its arms. As the energy continued to pour out, Eugene underwent a complete transformation, ascending into a supreme form. Cyranoa, watching in disbelief, struggled to comprehend what he was witnessing. The monster attempted to retaliate, swinging its weapon toward Eugene, but Cyranoa noticed something even more unsettling. Eugene's body was changing rapidly, and the pools of blood scattered throughout the area began surging toward him. It became clear to Cyranoa that Eugene was fundamentally different from ordinary vampires. Overcome with awe, he realized he might be witnessing a moment that would be remembered long after this battle ended. The protagonist advanced once more and struck the monster with overwhelming force, tearing its body apart into two separate pieces. As the scene unfolded, Cyranoa suddenly noticed something strange. The level of blood surrounding them dropped sharply, and the monster's regeneration occurred at an abnormal speed. Even for a high-ranking creature, the recovery was far too fast, almost as if it were receiving continuous healing. Cyranoa realized that the moment a single eye within the labyrinth opened and the blood pool shrank, the monster's fatal wound had been restored instantly. From this, he understood that the labyrinth itself was using the blood as fuel to heal the monster. Recognizing the source, the protagonist immediately changed his target and struck one of the eye-like structures embedded in the wall. As blood flowed from it, Cyranoa understood the connection. The protagonist then struck another eye structure without hesitation. While still airborne, the protagonist reached a clear conclusion. The Minotaur was not the true master of the labyrinth. The environment had been designed to allow humans to survive for extended periods, and the countless missing people were not accidents. They had been consumed gradually, serving as nourishment. The entire labyrinth itself was the god that those responsible had sacrificed to and worshipped. Outside the labyrinth, the Templars sensed something beyond their understanding. They believed divine wrath had descended upon the land, and that only a chosen savior could stop it. In their desperation, they longed for salvation to descend before everything was destroyed. At the same time, Lugates observed the situation with twisted satisfaction. He welcomed the chaos, believing that the god he had awakened was finally answering his prayers. Back inside, Cyranoa realized that all the blood had now been completely absorbed. At that moment, a mysterious sphere formed, containing a single eye. The sphere merged with the giant monster, completing its transformation. With newfound power, the monster broke through the ceiling of the labyrinth and escaped into the open sky. Cyranoa was left stunned by the sight. A high-ranking monster escaping the dungeon was something he had never witnessed before. His concern immediately turned outward, realizing that a civilian village was located dangerously close. Suddenly, Miriam reappeared and reported that an exit had been found. However, upon noticing the massive hole torn through the roof, panic set in as the structure began collapsing rapidly. There was no time to delay. Amid the chaos, the protagonist moved toward Galfredick, whose body had been pierced by the monster's spears and was on the verge of death. Miriam watched silently, unable to say anything further. Cyranoa observed the protagonist closely and felt conflicted. It was difficult to comprehend what he was witnessing. A vampire grieving for a human, concealing his true nature, living as a knight, and forming genuine bonds with people was something Cyranoa had never seen before. This was especially true of one who possessed such refined and noble blood. Without hesitation, the protagonist lowered himself beside Galfredick and bit into his neck, sinking his fangs in. Outside the labyrinth, the monstrous entity soared high into the sky, releasing a thunderous roar as it fixed its gaze on the village ahead. Inside the labyrinth, Cyranoa addressed the protagonist about a rare and ancient concept among vampires. He explained the existence of origin vampires, the highest-ranking and most noble aristocrats of the vampire race. At first, he had not realized it, but witnessing the protagonist's awakening made it clear to him that Eugene possessed the blood of an origin vampire. Cyranoa further revealed that an origin vampire held the ability to revive someone who had recently died and turn them into a vassal. He then questioned whether the protagonist understood the method of creating a vassal. As he listened, Eugene reflected silently. He was fully aware of the process, which involved biting the target's neck and injecting his blood through his fangs. However, he also knew the consequences such an act could bring. Eugene explained that he had attempted to create a vassal once before, but the subject's mind could not endure the transformation, forcing him to use that individual as a disposable pawn. Cyranoa acknowledged that this outcome would be expected for an ordinary human. However, he believed the situation might be different for a knight like Galfredik. He recalled knowledge passed down by his master, stating that if someone with exceptionally strong mental fortitude received the blood of an origin vampire, they would not self-destruct and would retain their abilities from their human life. Because of this, Cyranoa considered the attempt worthwhile. Still, he recognized the risk involved. As a proud knight, Galfredik might view a forced transformation into a vampire as an insult. If that happened, there was a real possibility he would turn hostile toward Eugene. With that concern in mind, Cyranoa awaited Eugene's decision. While looking at Galfredik, the protagonist reflects that he had never told him the truth about his nature. Because of that, he has no way of knowing what Galfredik truly thinks about vampires. Even so, he realizes there is no other option left. He resolves to leave the choice to Galfredik himself. At that moment, something goes wrong. The blood begins flowing far too quickly, and his fangs refuse to withdraw. The ritual of succession begins on its own. Under the blood ritual, the vassal becomes the property of the lord, their soul bound completely, and all of their power transferred as well. Only then is the succession considered complete. Suddenly, Galfredik's body begins to radiate a red glow. A massive beam of crimson energy surges upward into the sky, illuminating the entire area. The scene shifts to the nearby village, where monsters rampage through the streets. Villagers desperately attempt to flee as buildings burn and chaos spreads. Some recognize the creatures as roamers and realize the labyrinth has collapsed. Panic erupts as people scatter in every direction, trying to escape as flames consume their homes. From a distance, Lugates observes the destruction with satisfaction. He believes the moment has finally arrived, the moment he will receive payment for offering sacrifices to the labyrinth. In his mind, the villagers will never realize that everything unfolding is the result of a contract between himself and the labyrinth. When despair reaches its peak during the Minotaur's attack, he plans to appear, defeat the monster, and claim the role of savior. Through the human instinct to seek salvation in despair, he intends to become the Messiah they worship. The greater the suffering, the greater the reverence he expects to receive. More monsters pour into the village. Amid the chaos, a woman attempts to flee with her young son, but the child stumbles and falls. As a monster moves in to strike them, a sudden force intervenes. The protagonist appears in an instant and strikes the monster with overwhelming power. Grabbing it by the jaw, he tears the creature apart with raw strength. Witnessing this, Lugates is shaken to his core. He cannot comprehend how the protagonist is alive. The Minotaur should have absorbed his blood and awakened. He is certain the protagonist was offered as the final sacrifice and should have died. Yet here he stands, unharmed. Lugates wonders if the protagonist awakened at the brink of death, and if so, what kind of being he truly is. Standing over the fallen monster, the protagonist addresses Lugates coldly. He points out Lugates' reaction and questions whether Lord Zevin is aware of the catastrophe he caused. He dismisses the answer as irrelevant, declaring that Lugates will face judgment here and now. Suddenly, a shadow descends behind Lugates. The structure he stands on collapses violently, crumbling into ruins. Lugates begins laughing amid the destruction. At that moment, Galfredik appears before him. Having returned, he makes it clear that the humiliation from the tournament has not been forgotten. He has come to repay that debt and hold Lugates accountable for everything he has done. As the massive monster from the labyrinth advances, it begins seizing villagers one after another. Panic spreads instantly, and people scatter in all directions, desperately trying to escape. At that moment, the protagonist arrives and strikes the monster with overwhelming force. The sudden impact catches the creature off guard, forcing it to recoil. From a distance, The villagers watch in disbelief as someone confronts the monster head-on. They notice the figure's red eyes and black armor, and recognition quickly spreads among them. Hope rises as they realize the knight standing before the monster is Eugene, who has come to protect their village. Some begin to see him not just as a knight, but as a savior sent to rescue them. The protagonist launches another powerful attack, striking directly at the monster's eye and knocking it to the ground. As the creature struggles to rise again, he delivers a decisive blow, severing its head. The monster collapses, its body splitting apart as it crashes lifelessly onto the ground. At the same time, the magical tattoo on Lugate's hand begins to fade. His body gives out, and he collapses to the ground. Panic spreads among the Templars as they realize his fall signals disaster. Lugate struggles to rise, barely managing to move as he reaches for a sword. Despite his weakened state, he clings desperately to the belief that he still possesses divine power and attempts to proclaim himself as something greater. Before he can regain control, Galfridic appears before him and intercepts the weapon. The unnatural strength Lugate's displayed earlier is gone, leaving him exposed and helpless. As the realization sets in, Lugate drops to his knees, unable to stand any longer. Galfridic then turns toward the protagonist and awaits his command. The order is given without hesitation. With that, Lugate panics and attempts to flee, abandoning all pretense as terror overtakes him. His escape is short-lived. A figure appears directly in his path, blocking the way and confronting him with cold certainty. Lugate understands too late that there is no escape left. With Lugate's defeat, the long night finally comes to an end. News of his crimes spreads rapidly throughout the Evergrow territory. The truth of his atrocities becomes widely known, and the terror he caused is finally laid bare. Eugene is hailed as the hero who saved the land, and celebrations follow wherever he goes. Flower petals scatter in his path, and people praise his name. Yet none of it matters to him. For Eugene, the only thing that truly matters is that Galfridic is alive. That alone is enough. The scene later shifts to a dining table, where Galfridic sits across from Eugene. Though alive, he is still visibly shaken by everything he endured. Despite that, his usual energy returns as he speaks animatedly, expressing relief at having survived and reacting with confusion upon noticing Miriam. Now able to perceive her presence, he questions her existence with disbelief. Eugene calmly explains that she has been accompanying him. Miriam reacts with clear dissatisfaction, asserting her identity and importance as a great water spirit rather than something insignificant. Cyranoa, observing closely, realizes that he too can faintly perceive her presence. The protagonist casually catches Miriam in his hand, silencing her mid-speech. She had been asserting her status as his first contractor and attempting to establish superiority over the others, but her words are cut short as she is restrained. The protagonist calmly explains that although she talks excessively and can be irritating, she still has practical uses, even if only marginally so. He notes that she is normally invisible to humans, and that the reason the others can perceive her now is because of their prolonged exposure to his presence. He then turns his attention to Galfridic and explains that, as his vassal, Galfridic must now follow specific restrictions. From this point onward, he must drink only animal blood. While the protagonist himself only needs monster blood once or twice a month, he admits he is unsure how frequently Galfridic will require sustenance. Galfridic reacts with confusion as he considers what a vampire's life entails, particularly wondering whether sunlight must now be avoided. Miriam immediately reacts strongly to the idea, emphasizing the dangers of sunlight to vampires and expressing disbelief at his recklessness. Despite the warning, Galfridic steps into the sunlight without hesitation, fully expecting consequences. However, nothing happens. His skin remains unaffected, and he stands there unharmed, confused by the result. The protagonist is visibly shocked by this outcome. Cyranoa then explains the reason clearly. The weakness to sunlight applies only to common vampires. Origins, the highest and most noble class among vampires, are unaffected by daylight. Since the protagonist is an origin and Galfridic is his vassal, Galfridic naturally inherits that immunity. To confirm this, the protagonist himself steps into the sunlight and retracts the protection he had always maintained over his body. The sunlight has no effect on him either. This realization leaves him unsettled, as he questions why he endured such careful avoidance for so long. Galfredik begins to piece everything together. He recalls previous explanations, including the protagonist's claim of being an elf, and finally understands the real reason behind the hat: the constant avoidance of sunlight and the repeated refusal to duel during the day. The protagonist simply states that it was the best solution he had at the time. With that understanding, Galfredik eagerly expresses that there is now no reason for the protagonist to refuse him anymore and looks forward to working alongside him. As he attempts to address him, he hesitates over what to call him. This confusion prompts Cyranoa to intervene, explaining that Galfredik can no longer casually speak the protagonist's name and must instead address him properly as his master, as dictated by the bond between lord and vassal. Galfredik reacts with immediate protest, rejecting the idea outright. He insists that before being bound as a vassal, they were friends. Cyranoa responds matter-of-factly that complaining will not change the nature of the contract. The scene briefly shifts to the past, returning to the moment Galfredik revived after becoming a vampire. At that time, the protagonist stood before him and explained the reality of his transformation. Galfredik was no longer human, and while this was the only way to save his life, it would bring countless restrictions, dangers, and burdens, perhaps even worse than death itself. The protagonist made it clear that Galfredik was under no obligation to follow him, and that saving him had been nothing more than a personal whim. Galfredik, still seated on the ground, responded without resentment. He stated that whether he was human or not no longer mattered. What mattered was that his life had been saved by someone he respected and cared for. Rising to his feet with a bright expression, he declared that he was not foolish enough to ignore such a debt. Vassal or not, he would follow the protagonist for the rest of his life. The scene returns to the present, where Galfredik continues to voice his frustration at being unable to call his friend by name. The protagonist, observing this calmly, briefly considers silencing him permanently if necessary. Galfredik then abruptly changes the subject, asking about the whereabouts of the yellow bowl-cut man and Partek. The protagonist explains that he assigned them a secret mission and wonders quietly whether they managed to carry it out successfully. Inside a room within the palace, Lord Jebin informed Eugene that St. Lagran Monastery had sent a formal letter of gratitude. According to the letter, the monastery had been able to eliminate a heretical faction within its walls thanks to Eugene's actions. It was revealed that certain Templars had been illegally using banned anti-magic crystals to conduct raids on the labyrinth, and had been secretly expanding the heretical group. Eugene had noticed the irregularities and dispatched mercenaries to arrest them before the situation worsened. Eugene explained that Templars were meant to act solely according to divine will, which made their voluntary participation in the labyrinth subjugation suspicious. Combined with unsettling rumors about the coming end spreading throughout the territory, their behavior raised questions about what kind of divine intent truly motivated them. Lord Jebin acknowledged that St. Lagran Monastery was sponsored by House Evergrow and had always appeared to operate faithfully. If the heretical group had remained undiscovered, the family's honor could have suffered serious damage. After taking a seat, Lord Jebin expressed his gratitude on behalf of House Evergrow, adding that the people of the territory now held Eugene in extremely high regard and warmly welcomed him. Eugene accepted the sentiment politely and prepared to depart. Before he left, Lord Jebin congratulated him on Galfredik's safe return and expressed genuine relief that Eugene's friend had survived. After Eugene exited, Lord Jebin remained seated, his expression turning quiet and heavy. The scene shifted to a bar, where Galfredik was surrounded by friends celebrating his return. They spoke of the grim rumors surrounding his fate and admitted they had believed he would never return. Galfredik credited his survival largely to Eugene's help and acknowledged his role as Eugene's vassal. Some of his companions jokingly offered to serve Eugene as well, only to be flatly rejected. As the celebration continued, Galfredik noticed that the beer tasted unpleasant to him, realizing that his senses had changed since becoming a vampire. One of his companions pointed out the change in his eye color, questioning whether something had happened inside the labyrinth. Galfredik responded casually, shifting the focus to Partek and the bowl-cut youth, hinting that they had been overly praised after thoroughly looting the monastery. Laban protested being dismissed, insisting that he was now a proper mercenary, which earned him laughter from the others. Partek later spoke to Eugene, praising his insight in uncovering the monastery's true nature and mentioning that Duke Jebin had appeared genuinely shocked upon receiving the report. Eugene questioned whether the monastery's letter had truly been written out of pure gratitude, prompting Partek to realize that Lujits may have been intentionally used as a scapegoat. Eugene clarified that he had allowed events to unfold that way. By instructing Partek to target only the Templars and not the abbot, he ensured that House Evergrow's honor remained intact. Had the entire monastery been looted, blame would have fallen directly on Eugene for interfering with the institution itself. By leaving a narrow opening, the family only needed to sever ties with Lujits to resolve the matter. Partek understood that if this course was taken, the only person who would be forced to act was Duke Jebin. Moments later, Eugene informed Partek that they would have to leave Evergrow territory that very night, quietly and without drawing attention. The scene shifted again as Eugene and his companions traveled on horseback through the night. Elsewhere, soldiers loyal to Lujits were shown attacking civilians from a chariot, shouting in panic as they found themselves surrounded and under fire. As Partek rode alongside Eugene, his thoughts turned dark. He recalled the image of a man riding a black horse, clad in a black leather robe, Jan Eugene. Although Lujits had been a criminal, he was still a territorial knight favored by Duke Jebin. The Duke had deeply mourned his inability to personally punish Lujits after Galfreda killed him. To Partek, this situation felt like more than deception. It felt like a direct stain upon Duke Jebin's honor. Filled with resentment, he vowed to make Eugene pay, even imagining scarring his face, before briefly catching himself on that thought. At that moment, Eugene suddenly appeared on the battlefield and struck down one of the soldiers with a single decisive blow, severing his head instantly. Eugene suddenly raised his voice, signaling for everything to stop. The chariot came to an immediate halt, and the allied soldiers quickly turned their bows toward Lujit's companions. Realizing the situation had turned against them, the enemy forces attempted to retreat and regroup toward the rear. At that moment, Galfredic appeared on horseback, sword in hand, cutting off their escape. With his arrival, the remaining resistance collapsed. The allied companions closed in from all sides, and the soldiers loyal to Lujits were swiftly subdued and captured without further struggle. Galfredic, clearly satisfied, praised Eugene's tactics and noted how much cleaner his swordsmanship had become. He recognized the efficiency of using a saber while mounted and wondered when Eugene had learned such techniques. Eugene casually credited Galfredic himself as the source. The response left Galfredic momentarily confused, unable to recall when that knowledge had been passed on. Watching him, Eugene reflected inwardly that the statement was not entirely false. When he had injected his blood into Galfredic, all of Galfredic's accumulated skills and combat experience had flowed directly into Eugene's mind. Along with that transfer, Eugene recalled hearing a mysterious voice near his ear, speaking of a retainer belonging to their lord. Even now, he could not tell whether it had been a hallucination or something far more significant. One of the captured soldiers, clearly bitter, hurled accusations toward Galfredic, blaming him for insulting Duke Jebin and accusing him of wasting the honor of being recommended as a territorial knight. He mocked Galfredic's near death in the dungeon and attempted to shift responsibility onto Lujits. Eugene silenced the soldier curtly, dismissing his noise without interest. Galfredic recognized the captive as Sir Macaulay and greeted him casually, further irritating the man. Eugene then drew his sword and made it clear that the captives had come prepared to die, stating that only one of them would be allowed to return alive. Galfredic immediately intervened, suggesting that taking them prisoner would be a better option. Eugene questioned the idea, prompting Galfredic to explain that honoring those who had fought bravely was an old tradition and, more importantly, that ransoms would bring profit. After a brief pause, Eugene accepted the suggestion, clarifying that as long as their limbs remained intact, it would suffice. Taking up a wooden bat, he resolved to ensure their joints remained undamaged. Faced with this outcome, the captured soldiers panicked and begged for mercy. The scene shifted to a grand palace where the prisoners were being housed. One of them stared around in disbelief, astonished by the generous treatment they were receiving. The secretary of the merchant group reassured Eugene that covering such lodging costs posed no issue. Eugene acknowledged this calmly and informed her that the ransom would be collected directly from Duke Jebin. The secretary reacted with surprise upon realizing that Duke Jebin of House Evergrow would be paying, noting that territorial knights carried significant value. Eugene then handed over his damaged armor, requesting repairs, and remarking that despite claims of its durability, it had been pierced surprisingly easily. She assured him it would be reinforced far more thoroughly. Eugene also requested a brand new set of armor for Galfredik. Galfredik reacted with visible excitement, clearly touched by the gesture. Eugene explained that since Galfredik was now his man, maintaining a certain level of dignity was only appropriate. Galfredik responded enthusiastically, expressing satisfaction in having chosen to follow him. Watching the exchange, the secretary reflected inwardly that her judgment had been correct. Recruiting the renowned Galfredik was no small feat, but given how much loot Eugene's group brought in each time, a few suits of armor were a worthwhile investment. With skills like theirs, greater opportunities clearly lay ahead. She then asked Eugene about his next destination. Eugene replied that, for now, his focus would be on clearing higher-level dungeon areas. Smiling knowingly, the secretary hinted that greater ambitions always required more money and mentioned a gambling den she knew of. Eugene looked at her with clear confusion, unsure where that suggestion was leading. Inside Lord Jebin's mansion, his anger finally erupted. He slammed his fist onto the table, furious that every knight he had relied upon had proven useless. Knights of House Evergrow had failed to handle even a single opponent and had ended up captured alive. The humiliation gnawed at him. As the anger settled, fear crept in. Jebin reflected on Eugene's strength. He had known Eugene surpassed Lugit's, but the gap was far greater than he had imagined. The thought that Eugene had dared to kill his territorial knight weighed heavily on him, forcing him to question whether letting the matter rest was even possible. His attention then shifted to a map lying on the floor. Picking it up, Jebin began connecting the pieces. Eugene had entered the territory through the Palean Trading Company's introduction. That meant his next destination would almost certainly be one of the demon realms contracted with the same company. Among those remaining, only one stood out. With a slow, calculating smile, Jebin concluded that Eugene's path was obvious. The Philia ruins on the Kalsbajan Peninsula were where he would head next. The scene shifted to a ship sailing across open waters. Eugene traveled with his companions toward their next destination. During the journey, Galfredik shared information he had heard about the Kalsbajan Peninsula. The region had almost no influence from the Kalar's central church. The former ruler, Marquis Archibald, had been a fanatic who governed tyrannically, eventually losing power and plunging the peninsula into political instability. Even the Bishop of Kalsbajan had fled after the collapse, leaving the area without trust in religious authority. Eugene considered this information and regarded it as favorable. Galfredik agreed, clearly relieved by the lack of church influence. Mirian suddenly appeared, drawing attention to Cyranoa, who was suffering badly from seasickness. Galfredik found it puzzling that someone so affected by the sea had chosen to travel by ship. Cyranoa explained that the Blood Shadow School believed their magic would be of great assistance to an origin vampire, making the risk worthwhile. Galfredik pressed her further, questioning her true intentions. Cyranoa admitted that her school required large quantities of mid to high-rank monster byproducts to create chimeras. Researching and developing chimeras was the ultimate goal of their school. Even so, she insisted that her desire to assist Eugene was genuine and sworn by her name, her school, and magic itself. Galfredik summarized the situation simply, noting that Cyranoa was asking not to be discarded. He also pointed out that Mirian had her own motives as well, since a spirit forming a contract with a vampire was unusual. Mirian, momentarily distracted, revealed her fondness for gold. Eugene, hearing this, found nothing strange about traveling while collecting gold coins. Cyranoa reacted with surprise at the idea of spirits valuing money, while Mirian dismissed the confusion casually. Galfredik observed that everyone seemed to have their own reasons for staying together, and that it ultimately reflected how highly they regarded Eugene. Looking around the ship, Galfredik noticed mercenaries engaging in arm wrestling, loudly cheering each other on. He remarked that those mercenaries were likely traveling alongside them because of Eugene as well. Their rough laughter and playful taunts echoed across the deck, adding to the sense of movement and companionship. After a moment of thought, Galfredik asked himself what Eugene's true goal was, realizing he had never heard it clearly before. Eugene paused, then reflected inwardly. His goals were simple but heavy. He sought to recover his lost memories and uncover who he truly had been. At the same time, he intended to avoid dying miserably as he had in his past life. To do so, he needed to grow stronger through red mana stones. With the Holy Knight who had once killed him and the Kalar Kingdom's central church continuing their persecution of vampires, lowering his guard was never an option. Galfredic studied Eugene in silence, sensing the weight behind his thoughts. He eventually made it clear that Eugene did not need to explain anything further. Regardless of the goal, Galfredic was satisfied. Thanks to Eugene, he had been given a new life. With many unknown events waiting ahead, he found himself genuinely looking forward to what was to come. The protagonist responded calmly, pointing out that Galfredic had once wanted to rise in status. From his perspective, this path itself represented advancement. For a knight, pursuing honor through battle was a natural way forward. Galfredic, filled with satisfaction, reflected on how remarkable it felt to travel freely while enjoying sunlight. Compared to this journey, dying back then would have meant drifting down a bleak river of the afterlife. Grateful, he aligned his purpose fully with the protagonist, declaring that wherever his master went and whatever he chose to do, he would follow without hesitation. The protagonist listened in silence, his gaze steady and unreadable. Miriam suddenly appeared, enthusiastically expressing that while she liked gold coins, staying by Eugene's side was even better. At the same time, she clearly had no intention of abandoning the idea of collecting wealth and building something extravagant along the way. Cyranoa also stepped forward, making it clear that she intended to help as much as she could. The mercenaries joined in as well, expressing their loyalty openly and emphasizing that it was not driven by money. Cyranoa then bowed respectfully, asking only that they be compensated with ample monster byproducts in return for their efforts. The protagonist answered simply that such rewards would depend on their contribution. Accepting this, Cyranoa resolved to work harder. Internally, the protagonist acknowledged that the growing number of people around him meant additional responsibility. It was troublesome, yet the feeling that came with it was not unpleasant. Soon after, the group arrived at Mofern, a port city on the Kalsbajan Peninsula. As they disembarked, a group of soldiers approached. Their leader introduced himself as Baron, captain of a mercenary group assigned to escort Eugene to the barony of Biagalan, following a recommendation from the Palian Trading Company's Mofern branch. Galfredic stated that their schedule was tight and that they would depart immediately. After brief consideration, the protagonist agreed. As the group traveled onward on horseback, Baron explained that the barony of Biagalan was one of the few well-managed regions on the peninsula. However, despite this, they had failed for months to defeat even a single mid-rank monster. When the protagonist questioned whether a wyvern was involved, Baron confirmed it. The creature was highly cunning, attacking at irregular times, interfering with subjugation efforts, and only engaging directly after harpies had weakened the forces. Hearing this, the protagonist recognized the behavior as befitting a high-rank monster and quietly considered the opportunity it might present to obtain red mana stones. Baron then mentioned that if they encountered bandits along the way, it would be best to pay a reasonable toll. This struck the protagonist as odd, prompting him to question the connection between wyverns and bandits. Baron hesitated, his explanation cut short as an old memory surfaced, one in which a bishop warned him never to treat a knight personally sent by Deputy Branch Manager Priscilla carelessly. Pulling himself back to the present, Baron kept his true thoughts to himself. He believed Eugene appeared to be a sheltered noble and worried it would be troublesome if someone like him were killed by bandits before even reaching their destination. Observing Galfredic, he acknowledged the knight's strength, yet still assumed Eugene relied on him merely to gain fame. Returning to the conversation, Baron redirected the focus, stating that Eugene's objective lay in demon realm subjugation, not bandit hunting. Miriam, however, sensed something off about the captain and voiced her suspicion. At the same time, the protagonist felt an unusual presence. Without hesitation, he turned to Galfredic and asked for a spear. Galfredic handed it over immediately. The protagonist took the spear and hurled it with overwhelming force. It pierced a distant man instantly, killing him on the spot. Panic spread among the hidden figures nearby, and one of them shouted in fury. Moments later, more bandits revealed themselves, realizing they had been exposed, and launched an attack. Baron was stunned. There had been no visible signs of an ambush, yet Eugene had noticed it instantly. As the protagonist rode forward, he instructed Baron not to break formation and to guard the carriage. Baron panicked, urging caution and insisting that paying the toll would have been safer. The protagonist dismissed the concern calmly, assuring him that he was worrying too much. Turning to Galfredic, the protagonist urged him forward. Galfredic responded eagerly, ready to charge. Behind them, Baron drew his sword, frustration boiling over. From the beginning, he had sensed danger, and now his fears were confirmed. In his mind, Eugene was nothing more than a reckless noble driven by pride. After the bandits were subdued, a sword unlike the others was discovered among their possessions. Its blade carried a distinctive red and black hue, and even at a glance, its material clearly marked it as a weapon of exceptionally high quality. The protagonist examined it closely and questioned how people like them could have come into possession of such an item. The leader of the bandits collapsed to the ground in submission, explaining that the sword had been taken from someone who had boasted about stealing it in Fairchild. He begged for mercy, offering everything they owned and even proposing slavery in exchange for their lives. The protagonist considered this briefly, pointing out that if everyone involved were counted, there were simply too many mouths to feed. Maintaining them would require unnecessary resources. Desperate, the bandit leader insisted they would endure starvation and survive on nothing but water if spared. As this unfolded, the captain observed the scene in disbelief. Within just 2 days, from major bandit groups that had long plagued nearby villages had been wiped out. From his perspective, this only reinforced the idea that the protagonist was someone personally backed by the vice manager of the Palian Merchant Guild. The bandit leader broke down entirely, pleading again for mercy. One of the villagers, watching the sight of the once rampaging bandits kneeling so easily, felt a quiet sense of irony. The protagonist eventually concluded that there was no time to deal with them further. Their schedule was already tight, and it was time to move on. As preparations were made to leave, a villager hurried forward, asking what would happen to the remaining bandits. When the protagonist asked for clarification, the villager hesitated, admitting that they had assumed he had come to protect the village. The protagonist regarded him in confusion, clearly having had no such intention in mind. Galfredic, amused by the situation, remarked that it seemed the villagers were hoping to serve the protagonist as their lord. This only deepened the protagonist's confusion. Nevertheless, the villagers gathered before him, earnestly insisting that their village needed a righteous figure like him to lead them. The captain, watching this unfold, suddenly realized something important. The bandits who once dominated the region were gone. This created a rare opportunity, one where serving under an exceptional knight could change his own standing. Stepping forward, he explained that the bandits the protagonist had defeated were notorious forces in the area, and with most of them either dead or enslaved, the surrounding regions were now effectively leaderless. In simple terms, if the protagonist wished, he could become a lord immediately. Mirian eagerly supported the idea, encouraging the protagonist to accept the village as his territory. He paused, weighing the suggestion carefully. Power and status were not inherently bad. As an invisible force, they could help restrain the influence of the central church. Still, his true priority remained unchanged. What mattered most to him was the red magic stone. He questioned whether becoming a lord was worth spreading his resources thin when his true objective lay elsewhere. Before he could reach a conclusion, something outside drew his attention. Partek rushed into the house with urgent news. The bandits who had been captured as slaves had escaped. They had hidden metal fragments in their mouths, used them to cut their restraints, stolen horses, and fled. During the chaos, Rabin, who had been bringing them food, was seriously injured. Rabin, badly wounded, pleaded weakly for vengeance. Partek asked whether they should pursue the escapees. The protagonist replied that he was considering it, then noticed Partek's own injury. Partek explained it was only a shallow cut on his hand, most of the blood belonging to Rabin instead. At that moment, the protagonist's expression darkened. The idea that mere bandits had dared to injure his mercenaries filled him with cold anger. He resolved that he would not let them live. Laban, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, wondered whether the temperature itself had dropped. Galfredic stepped forward, ready to act. The protagonist instructed him to remain behind and guard the village. He was also told to inform the village chief that the offer of lordship would be accepted and that the injured should receive proper treatment. Galfredic acknowledged the order with enthusiasm, already viewing the situation as one where weeds would be torn out by the roots. The scene shifted back to the village, where flames had begun to spread uncontrollably. Houses were burning, and terrified villagers rushed about desperately trying to extinguish the fire, hauling water with shaking hands as panic spread through the streets. Not far from the village, the escaped bandits approached while observing the chaos. One of them recalled what he had overheard while being held captive. The Black Knight had gone to the Philia ruins to hunt a wyvern. Since that knight was from Marin, he would either leave immediately after subjugating the monster or die fighting it. His companion laughed at the thought, convinced that once the Black Knight was gone, they would reclaim Paranan without resistance. As they entered the village, frightened villagers confronted them, demanding to know who they were and whether they were responsible for setting the church ablaze. One of the bandits responded casually, remarking that since the Black Knight had killed the bandits who once ruled the area, the village had become livable again. The villagers, stunned by the implication, struggled to understand what was happening. The bandit then declared that the villagers now belonged to them. Without hesitation, Hayden struck down a villager with his sword, announcing that from that moment onward, they would cut down anything that stood in their way. Screams echoed as villagers collapsed in pain. Another bandit boasted that once they seized control of the silver mine in the nearby mountain, everything would fall into place. At that instant, the protagonist appeared silently behind the speaker. He seized the bandit's head with both hands, noting with cold clarity that the region's disorder finally made sense. Carlsbagen had become a breeding ground for bandits precisely because of resources like the silver mine. With overwhelming force, he crushed the bandit's skull, killing him instantly. The remaining bandits froze in terror. One of them recognized him immediately and cried out that the Black Knight had arrived. The protagonist advanced toward them calmly, observing that despite fleeing while injured, this pitiful village was all they had managed to reach. To him, their desperation only highlighted their foolishness. Panic erupted. Some bandits turned and fled, screaming in disbelief at how he had caught up to them. Others begged their companions not to abandon them. One bandit collapsed to his knees and pleaded for forgiveness, swearing to surrender properly this time. The protagonist stepped forward and cut him down in a single motion, splitting his body apart. Another bandit attempted to escape on horseback, hurling curses as he fled. The protagonist raised his sword and struck him down as well. The man fell from the horse, his scream cut short as the animal bolted away in terror. With the bandits eliminated, the protagonist lowered his blade and walked back toward the burning village. Reaching the shaken villagers, he calmly reassured them, revealing his name and identity. He told them that the filth that had tried to seize Mintan no longer existed and that they could finally rest easy. He vowed to protect the village. Before he could finish, an arrow suddenly flew toward him. He caught it midair and immediately recognized the type of bolt. Its origin was clear. It had been fired from the forest. Miriam appeared beside him, warning that something felt wrong. She sensed the presence of an advanced monster from the demonic realm nearby and urged caution. At that moment, a shadowy figure became visible on a tree branch in the distance. The presence radiated confidence and ownership, as though the land itself had already been claimed. A white-haired young man emerged, wielding a crossbow, his gaze fixed squarely on the protagonist. Another bolt was fired without hesitation. The protagonist dodged the shot and studied the attacker carefully. Red eyes, fangs. The realization struck him instantly. The white-haired man landed on the ground, mocking the protagonist for his surprise. To him, a vampire recognizing another vampire was hardly remarkable. He sneered, belittling the protagonist as a rootless wanderer and ridiculing his appearance. With unmistakable arrogance, the man introduced himself as Del Mondo, declaring that the cold blue blood of the Nopros clan flowed through his veins. Claiming authority by blood alone, he commanded the protagonist to kneel before him.